We got some big chapters today, unfortunately, and like there's parts that I didn't hate, but it's a lot to get through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So do you want to get started with the trigger warnings before we get into discussing too much?
Um, the trigger warnings are animal sacrifice, animal death, incest in every chapter somehow, a mention of non-consensual drugging or roofing, however you want to put that,
Yeah.
rape, violent rape, strangulation, a mention of rape, and coercive rape.
Yeah. There's a lot going on with these ones.
Yeah, I just to like before we even start talking about anything, the
Hmm.
way that people talk about this book is not right. And by
Yeah.
that I mean other Percy Jackson podcasts cover this book and it is actually like very dangerous to your audience that is younger if
Hmm.
you don't warn them about what is in this book, and they don't.
Yeah.
Like your fan base is your responsibility to protect them, and this is a like a I understand why people like to talk about this book,
Hmm.
but if you're going to like review it, you need to like make them be very aware of what is inside of it. I
Yeah.
understand now why that like a review I found about it a couple months ago of a 16-year-old girl who had like a depressed as like severe depressive episode after reading this book. I now understand why that happened to her because
Hmm.
she just saw that this book was really popular and wanted to read it. But this is not the kind of book you should go into without knowing what's actually in it
Yeah.
because it's not easy, especially if you're a teenager and you don't even know about a lot of these sort of things in life and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I will say I'm glad that Madeline Miller, when she writes any sort of sexual scene, that she does not include a lot of detail, that it's not
Mm-hmm.
like super drawn out. Like, 'cause even in romantic aspects, even when it's fully consensual and romantic, like Achilles and Patroclus, it wasn't the most detailed love scenes. It's not like reading smut.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I did appreciate that at least, like, even though there is a scene in there that it's not like over the top with details in the same way, I mean, like hold them down is.
Mm-hmm.
There's elements to it, but elements where it's like she doesn't need to say all of it to get the point across.
Yeah, she doesn't.
Yeah. And so yeah, I had a feeling before getting into these chapters that it was going to deal with Medea's story to start off with, just because like the timeline's murky with mythology in general, but like when it comes to Jason and the Argonauts and Medea, there's mention of Prometheus in at least I believe Apollodorus's Argonautica, and when I saw a footnote on it, it was like because she even says, Circe says, like, oh, these people came on a ship to my island, and many people have claimed that they were either on that ship or they're related to somebody who was on that ship. She's
Mm-hmm.
talking about the Argo, and the journey for the Golden Fleece. Heracles was on it. And so Heracles being the person who saved Prometheus, at one point he disappears from the Argo and their specific journey, and it's either within that time period, I believe, or sometimes after, at least in that version of the myth, that he ends up saving Prometheus. So she kind of puts this in the timeline as this is before Prometheus gets saved. She even says it herself. And so we open up chapter 13 with a Mycenaean style ship coming in. I just realized this one is Jason and not somebody else. I was thinking it was the people that eventually come to our island for bad reasons, but I mean, um, so yeah, like I said, she says later, of course, there'd be thousands who claimed they were there or invented genealogies to trace their blood back. So that's how you know that she's talking about Jason and the Argonauts pretty quickly if you know your lore.
Mm-hmm.
And then, it just, you get more and more hints as you go along. She starts talking about how the people that came off were a man who looked very heroic. He's described as muscular. He looks like really powerful. And then a woman who she is veiling her face and her hair, which, I mean, we know descendants of Helios have very distinct hair and eyes. And so that's your other hint right away. Oh, this is Medea. Um, so yeah, her veil was arranged so that not one strand of hair showed beneath it. That was my hint. Um, so what they tell Circe when they get off their ship is, we need help. We need help because we've done great evil to escape great evil. And so she talks about, it's called miasma, pollution for unpurified crimes. Um,
Mm-hmm.
And what they're asking for isn't necessarily witchcraft. It's like a ritual to cleanse yourself after you commit a murder in the way that they do, especially. And I know, like, the animal sacrifice part, the idea behind it, I believe, is that you use blood to wash away blood. And so, like, you take a pure animal, and that's what the idea behind it is, at least. I know for us modern readers, it's like, I don't like reading about the fact that she just grabbed this little calf and did this, but
Mm-hmm.
that at least was the logic that they had when they were thinking about it. Um, let's see. So she grabs a piglet, says not half a year old, pure and unspotted. That's another thing that always comes up, is they want like animals with a pure white coat or if possible. Um, let's see. And another thing, this is like a nod to her classicist roots, is she says that when she has the limp little piglet in her hands, it's almost like a sleeping child, and all the while he was quiet as if he knew and agreed. That's actually a very Roman sentiment. Romans believed before they led an animal into sacrifice, like if it doesn't seem like it's going willingly, you got to start the whole ritual over. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's a necessary part of it. So she kind of gets that response from the animal right away, because girl's giving like a mixture of sorceress and druid, like with like how she deals with plants and animals. Um, let's see. So she carries out the rites. They pray. They pour the blood over their, and then she says like afterwards she would end up cooking the body for their meal. But it's after that Medea starts revealing herself. So the first thing she does is she takes off the veil. And then you can see she has golden hair. It says hair like the sun. That's another hint. And let's see, a demigod. She was a potent mix of human and divine. And more than that, she was my kin. None had such golden look except the direct line of Helios. And when Medea reveals herself, she says, like, at first she seems very complimentary. She's like, I've always wanted to meet you, Aunt Circe. Um, I'm sorry that I deceived you. I didn't think that you would let me stay here if I didn't deceive you, which is probably true.
Mm-hmm.
And then Circe starts remarking at her features because her face was veiled before this. And so this is the part of Medea's story that I think is why Euripides' Medea, the play, gets like still talked about, is Medea is canonically a foreigner to the Greek lands. And so she starts talking about some of her features. She says she's very beautiful, but like all of the features, if you look at them individually, aren't. And that's kind of her way of like Circe is noticing this person's foreign.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and let's see. Um, this part was interesting to me. The first thing she says of why she didn't want to give herself away is, you and my father were close as children. I cannot know what messages he might have sent you about his wayward daughter. When we know Circe's received like no communication from any sibling at this point, except for Pasiphae, who sent for her for the birth of the Minotaur.
Mm-hmm.
Aedes has just completely forgotten she existed, even though she boy moms over him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then she knows this not from Aedes, but from Hermes, and Hermes telling her about like, oh, these are your nieces and nephews that were born, and this is what they're like. And so she's like, oh, you're Aedes' child, Medea, is it not? And so she realizes that the way that she deceived her was really crafty at that point, I think because she's Aedes' child. That's right away like, oh, yeah, you're my brother. And of course, she would take advantage of the fact that she's asking me for help with this ritual. And, like, because of Xenia, because the laws of how we treat guests, I'm not really supposed to ask you about news or about why you're asking me for this ritual. Like, I'm just supposed to feed you and be a good host first before you give me anything in return.
Mhm.
And, let's see. So they're Jason and Medea then have a meal with her. It says he ate what she gave him hungrily, and when I refilled the tray, he chewed that as well. Hero's jaw was working steadily. She ate little. Her eyes were lowered, a secret again. And like Medea Medea's more witch than Circe is when you think about like her and source material. The way she's treated, Cersei gets to live in that in between I'm a goddess and I'm a sorceress kind of thing. Medea is 100% like, nah, I am a witch and that is who I am because she doesn't have divine blood in the same way. But this almost makes me question like, do demigods have the same like appetite stuff in these ones? It's hard to say. Madeline Miller doesn't give us a clear answer on her demigods because I think even her Achilles like sometimes would have nectar and ambrosia, but like not really.
Mhm.
Didn't really talk about him eating. I don't know. I just didn't know what to make of her saying like, "Oh, she's just sitting there feeding Jason and not even really eating."
Yeah. Um, I just took it as her just being trying to act submissive
Yeah.
so that Cersei would talk to her.
Yeah, either that or to keep up the thing with Jason. Um, It, Jason starts telling his story, says, I was heir to the king of Iolcus. My father was a virtuous king but soft-hearted, and when I was a child, my uncle seized his throne from him. He said he would return it to me when I was grown if I gave him proof of my worth, a golden fleece kept by a sorcerer in his land of Colchis. Um, and one thing he says here, Lady Hera and Lord Zeus blessed my purpose. They guided me to my ship and helped me gather my comrades. Um, he offered Aedes fair payment for the fleece, but Aedes refused. And the only reason he was able to perform the task, Medea jumps in and says, it was me. I was the reason he was able to perform the task. Um, so, really quickly, him thanking Hera first, especially, and then Lord Zeus in that speech that he gives Cersei. Hera is kind of the cause of Jason and Medea, almost like it's definitely her brainchild.
Mhm.
So, in the Argonautica, that version of the story at least, Hera is the one who comes up with this idea like, shoot, how am I going to help Jason? Well, there's a princess where he's going. I get the princess to fall in love with him, and that's the thing. And Athena is with her. Athena agrees. She's like, I don't know how to do this. I'm a virgin. Like, I have no idea how one makes this happen. And so they go to Aphrodite, who is currently having some sort of argument with Cupid slash Eros. And they were like, oh, you gotta be a very doting mother, and then he'll do what you want, and he'll want to do things for you. And so they kind of like manipulate Cupid into going to go hang out with them and shooting Medea with one of her arrows. So Medea, in source material, is usually the one who's enchanted. She's the one who has Cupid's spell over her, and that's
Mhm.
why she helps. That's why she betrays her family in such a vicious way. But in this one, like it's interesting that he gives the acknowledgement to Hera when that's not the backstory that Madeline goes with.
And I will say that similar to Pasiphae, like Medea could be enchanted during this,
Yeah,
especially how she's like, no, he loves me. Towards like the end of her stuff, like she very much could be.
that's
But
true.
it's just that Madeline's version of this, she doesn't think that anyone would care. Like that's like
Hmm.
very much her narrative that this world doesn't care about what happens with women. So they, even if they knew that she was, I don't think the way that they talk about this stuff, she's presents it as like they wouldn't care anyway.
Yeah.
Um, if she was, and so that's what that feels like to me anyway.
Hmm. Yeah, so Medea, she jumps in the conversation to be like, I'm the person who got him through my dad's tests. My dad's tests were basically impossible. And this is, straight out of source material, which is he had to work with the oxen that breathe fire. She gave him a potion, basically made him fireproof. And then there's the dragon teeth warriors. They sew dragon teeth into the land, come out as warriors. We talked about this with Percy Jackson stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's those warriors that
Mm-hmm.
end up chasing them through, was it Titan's Curse? Yeah, it was Titan's Curse, right?
Yep.
Um, let's see. And so I mean, we do get little hints more with her than with Pasiphae and the bull, because, like, we don't see Pasiphae and the bull ever interact. The bull had disappeared by the point we get to in the story. But, like, as you said, there could be still the love spell, and it's a if you know it, you know it kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
because there's little lines like her gaze was fixed passionately on Jason's face. Um, like just the way she looks about him, the way she talks about him, the way she's acting like this is going to work. It is giving a little Delulu, like when you know the backstory.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. So when she's describing all of the ways that she helped Jason get around her dad's tests, Circe says, "So you contrived a trick." Jason did not like that. He was a hero of the Great Golden Age. Trickery was for cowards, not bull necked enough to show true courage. Medea spoke quickly over his frown. My love would have refused all help, but I insisted, for I could not bear to see him in danger. The trickery part, though, I have to bring that up because her number one situationship at this point was still Hermes, and we know that she's going to have one with Odysseus later. So it's interesting that she's like, I know that men in this hero age think trickery is for cowards, but that ends up being the type of man she goes for. Like even Prometheus, who she has like not necessarily a romantic thing for, but like intellectually, she's looking for an equal to him in every
Mm-hmm.
man that she meets. And so I don't know. It was a funny thing for her to point out, in my opinion, because of that.
Mm-hmm.
But at this point, Medea's like whole thing, it starts getting a little bit more scary because she gives a hint that she's using witchcraft, and she's like, I have small skill, so that's how I was able to create um a potion that would help Jason with the bulls in the fire, and that's how I was able to create something to put the dragon that guards the fleece to sleep. But right away Circe picks up on this, and she's like, that's not small skill to be able to create things like that. Like, that sounds above what Circe already has determined that Pasiphae does, which is
Mm-hmm.
just little herbs and little remedies. So Medea's got some advanced magic on her. Let's see. As they're talking, let's see. She she notices that as Jason's talking up his own achievements, it seems like he's already telling the version he's going to tell people when he gets back to Greece of how he did these great tasks. And it says he did not thank Medea for her aid. He scarcely looked at her, as if a demigoddess saving him at every turn was only his due. And um, Jason in mythology, I think he got a little spoiled initially by Hera, especially. And that's why he does, like, I feel like that does fall in line for Jason of like, oh yeah, of course things just work for me. Because he is one of those people that's favored by a god, even though his ending is terrible.
Mm-hmm.
So it, I feel like that was kind of spot on with his characterization for me. Um, but Cersei at this point decides to ask, okay, so what blood did I end up washing from your hands? And so Medea tells the story. Uh, After she helps Jason, she says, my father was enraged. He set out after us, his witchcraft drawing the winds to his sail, and by morning he was very close. I knew my spells were no match for his. Our ship, however blessed, could not outrun him. The only hope I had, my younger brother, whom I had taken with us, he was my father's heir, and I had thought to exchange him as a hostage for our safety, but when I saw my father at his prow shouting curses across the water, I knew it would not work. The killing rage was plain on his face. He would be satisfied with nothing but our ruin. He spoke spells in the air. He lifted his staff to bring them down upon our heads. I felt a great fear running through me, not for myself, but for blameless Jason. At that moment, I cannot describe it. A madness came over me. I seized Jason and commanded him to kill my brother. Then I cut the body into pieces and threw them into the waves. Wild as my father was, I knew he must stop to give him a proper burial. When I woke from my fit, the seas were empty. I thought it had been a dream until I saw my hands were covered in my brother's blood. So really quick a note on source material before we discuss that part is that there's multiple versions of the brother story. So the version here is one that exists in source material. It was a little brother she took with her when she was running away. That is the most like, the brother is completely blameless in that one. It's a little bit like, geez, that's really awful that you did that. But there is another version, and I believe it is the one that's in the Argonautica, the one that I keep referencing about Jason and the Argonauts. And it's that her brother was sent to pursue them. Like, I have to imagine he's either a old teenager or a young adult from the sounds of it.
Mm-hmm.
But he was sent to chase after them on his own ship. And he caught up with them twice, nearly captured them twice. And that was the point when Jason kills the brother. Medea decides like, okay, my dad's not gonna not bury him, so I'll cut him up, and cause this diversion so that he has to retrieve all the pieces of him to give him a proper burial. And so Madeline, in essence, what I'm trying to get to, she went with the most gruesome, most hard to sympathize with Medea version of that.
Mm-hmm. She would.
Yeah.
Um, but she just does pretty much every time. She always goes with the harshest version, no matter who it is that she's talking about, really. That's just her style, I've realized, in the last two books. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. Um, I don't know. I like, as the conversation goes on with her and Cersei, I can definitely like empathize with Medea, but at this point, it makes her look like, you know, crazy, or
Yeah.
another word equally as bad.
Yeah, and that's again another reason why the Seneca play, Medea, the tragic ending of their love story, I think hits so hard is because in some ways you are meant to sympathize with her. You are meant to think like this poor woman literally like she betrayed her family. She's in a foreign land where she has no rights, and the one person who is supposed to take care of her, who she helped become a king, just like abandons her for a Greek princess at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like you are supposed to waver, I think, in your like, how do I feel about Medea, especially as she ends up murdering her own children in the mythology. Um, but having her murder her little brother first, I don't know. It feels like, oh, so she was just always like this.
Uh, I guess, but like this goes into like what they when they talk by themselves later on.
Hmm.
It came across to me more as like this is what it takes to survive,
Yeah.
to get away from her brother. And so it's like
Yeah.
if the choices are like going to be brought back home to somebody like that who's going to do just god awful things to me,
Most
or
likely kill her at that point.
yeah, or kill my brother, I'm going to kill my brother.
Yeah.
Um yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. So the brother that they're talking about, I forgot what his name is. It's one of those ones that looks hard to pronounce when you see it. It starts with an A. But he's also the youngest brother, Aedes being the youngest brother, and I almost wonder if she like I mean, because that's just the facts in source material, but there kind of is a mirroring here when you think about it of like youngest brother who is meant to be the heir, who is treated as special. And then you have Medea, who is this very, very powerful witch, but seems to get no regard at all from her dad, even before all of this went down.
Yeah.
Um,
There
so
I
it's,
do I do think there
yeah,
is mirroring happening between her and Circe, particularly um to how Circe starts acting after stuff happens. Um, and I
yeah,
don't.
that's the next thing there is so, yeah, Medea, we find out, has been drugging Jason.
Mhm.
It's very much like a making him like loopy, comatose almost, it seems like, because she puts a pinch of powder into his wine, whispers something, and then all of a sudden he's just like kind of dead behind the eyes, it seems.
And I'll be honest, like I've never been roofied. Um,
Hmm.
I'm I'm terrified of being like blackout drunk normally. I need to like remember what happens to me. And so I've hardly even gone out to like bars to even drink very much. But I
Yeah.
will say that that does sound similar to what people have said when
Hmm.
they say that they've been roofied at a bar. That's pretty much what people say is the experience of like all of a sudden they're really tired in a
Yeah.
way that like where people around them think that they're more drunk than they are, but they go from like zero to like blackout drunk where they're like falling asleep at the bar really fast. And so that's what she's basically doing with Jason is like just making him be basically like asleep, where she can just do whatever without him really being aware, and she can do whatever without him like questioning what she's doing and things like that. That's what that reminded me of anyway. I don't know if Madeline knows about that kind of or thought about that kind of thing, but it probably because that's
Probably.
just what it reminded me of from other people's stories.
Yeah. Um, let's see. So getting to when Medea, she starts asking Medea, so you don't feel bad about everything you've done. She says, I suppose I could weep and rub my eyes to please you, but I choose not to live so falsely. My father would have destroyed the whole ship if I had not acted. My brother was a soldier. He sacrificed himself to win the war. She says, except he didn't sacrifice himself, he murdered him. She said, I gave him a draught so he would not suffer. It's better than most men get. Um, He's your blood. Her eyes burned bright as a comet in the night sky. Is one life worth more than another? I have never thought so. Um, but yeah, like so that's pretty much exactly what you said. She saw it as this is literally my only way out to survive this situation. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's one of those things because I mean the boy momming over Aedes is an undercurrent in this chapter. It's not as explicit as it has been at the beginning of the book, but Medea has to like very pointedly talk about her dad's cruelty. Like, do you know what my dad does for fun? He puts these drugged up people into fights and stuff and like sets them on fire randomly and he would
Yeah,
have done that to me.
that stuff greatly bothered me,
Yeah.
just because Circe is being a victim blamer. Like
Hmm.
she's having to sit there and like prove to her um, that her brother did these horrible things when Pasiphae. There's a whole thing in these chapters that literally every single thing that happens, Pasiphae tried to warn her
Hmm.
about every single thing that happens to her in these chapters, and she did not listen.
Yeah.
Everything that happens to her, her sister brought up, and she just disregarded it because she didn't want to like her sister. And it makes
Yeah.
me really upset that in, at least in mythology, they never speak again,
Hmm.
because she should. She should talk to Pasiphae and be like, I'm sorry I didn't listen to you. Because if
Yeah.
she would, most of the things that happened to her wouldn't happen. Um, but anyway, this part with Medea, I was like, yeah, I like you. Am I not supposed to? But I like you. I like empathize with you because it's like, yeah, am I supposed to cry and be sad about the things that I was forced to do in order to survive this person who is also my dad?
Hmm.
Should I like act like this makes me really sad, or should I just own up to the fact that yeah, this is what I had to do? Because the focus of it is never on, like, imagine how horrible somebody is, that
Hmm.
these are the kind of choices you have to make in order to get away from them. It's always like, how could you do something like that? And it's like, I don't know, why didn't you ask him? And
Hmm.
like why he is so scary and so controlling that you have to do things like that in order to get away.
Yeah.
Like she should not have to kill her brother to get her dad to stop trying to kill her. Her dad
Yeah.
should just stop trying to kill her so she doesn't have
Exactly.
to use her brother's dead body as a diversion to get him to back off for a little while. Like that's always an option too. But even within this story, Circe's like, how could you do that? You murdered your little brother. And it's like, no, my dad murdered my little brother. I was just the one that did it. But like, am I supposed to just like lay down and let him do that to me? That's
Yeah.
not an option. Like, what else would you have or anyone else have done in that situation? Nothing else better.
Yeah. She really, and I don't know. Once again, I don't love that Madeline chooses not to like have Cupid or Aphrodite play parts in these myths, just because I feel like that would add just another layer of depth to it because she does go with the, well, Medea's kind of like dark and gives a bad vibe after this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I do get it. Like, watching her literally drug her now husband and talk about how she did all of these things, that sounds pretty similar to Pasiphae. Like that, like the way that she's speaking sounds similar to Pasiphae. I could see why Circe is not comfortable with it, but I don't know. I would have loved to see them have more camaraderie in these moments.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I underlined about like her talking about the vibe that Medea is giving off is each word was as dark as an axe head, heavy and unrelenting, and my blood drained at every blow. There is a monologue within Euripides' Medea that I remember one of my professors calling out, and it was because the word choice, it used a lot of guttural sounds, so it wasn't Greek, but it was a lot of like harsh sounds in the dialogue. And he's like, this is a very pointed choice on Euripides, because when you hear this in Greek, it sounds like somebody's yelling. Like it sounds mean, it sounds harsh. And so Medea being that kind of figure, I don't know. I love that she included that, but I don't know if that's just me putting something my teacher said that never left my head into like what she's putting in this characterization.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Um, she talks about how she is basically nothing to Aedes. She said, I am no child to him. I was his to dispose of like his seed warriors or his fire breathing bulls, like my mother, whom he dispatched as soon as she bore him an heir. Perhaps it might have been different if I had had no witchcraft, but by the time I was 10, I could tame the adders from the nest. I could kill lambs with a sword and bring them back with another. He punished me for it. He said, it made me unmarketable, but in truth, he did not want me taking his secrets to my husband. And then Circe thinks of Pasiphae's words, Aedes has never loved a woman in his life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just like It's interesting that she can hear all of these people talk about Aedes like this, and still she's not like, oh, my brother's an asshole.
Yeah, I don't know. She just can't. I don't know why, but
Hmm.
well, I would say at this point she almost is trying not
Yeah,
to like prove Pasiphae wrong, um, in a weird way, but it's also just really frustrating. Because it's like, yeah, oh, why would she make that up?
yeah,
And like, yeah, that's exactly what it's like. You're not like a person to people like that. You're just an object. And
yeah,
that stuff is exactly why that stuff happens. Of like, oh, he didn't want me to tell anybody his secrets, and it's like, yeah, that's why they do everything, so
hmm,
that you're too afraid of them, so that you won't tell anybody anything that they've actually said or done or whatever. It's just a
yeah.
magical version of it.
So we find out next that Aedes tried to marry her off to Perses, her uncle, Circe's brother, like their sibling. And I was trying to look at, like how common was like uncle niece marriage. It was something that was allowed, like technically. I think it was the kind of thing that happened mostly mostly for like political and economic reasons. It wasn't like, people chose that necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
So, in a situation where, let's say, you didn't produce an heir, you just had daughters, you might do that to keep the land within the family. Um, and yeah, political power is a big one. In this case, I see Aedes choosing this within the context of ancient Greece, at least, choosing this because if he is afraid of her powers going outside of the family, you marry her within the family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This was like the first thing of like incest, because that's what that is.
Yeah.
And I have a very different like outlook on a lot of that stuff. Like I feel like a lot of people are like, "Oh, people believed or did this stuff to for like
Yeah.
power to like keep things in the family so that they could keep all of their money." And like, yeah, there probably is some of it is to keep all of their money
Hmm.
within the people that they are related to, so that it doesn't so that their what is it called, like
Yeah.
their ruling basically end, but also is just to like fuck with people.
Yeah.
Like that's literally all it usually is. It's like they're super powerful. No one can do anything when you're the ruler. No one's ever going to take you down or even find out about anything that you're doing or believe anyone, even if they do tell anyone what you're doing. And so, like, why not? Like,
Yeah.
for super powerful people like that who feel like they can do anything, I'm pretty sure that's the most of the reason why there's so many stories about like incest things with like
Yeah.
royal families. Instead, I'm sure they were like, we just want to keep it inside the family. And I'm like, no, you just want to fuck with each other.
Yeah.
Like, that's why you're doing it because you're told that you're the like human like stand in for like whatever their version of God is in this world, and you're a man, and so you feel like you can do basically anything.
Yeah.
It was just that's the way that they could do it because marriage was like what women were supposed to do, so that's how they could control them was by forcing them to marry people that they knew they wouldn't want to marry.
Yeah. And if she's throwing around these powerful spells at the age of 10, like, it it was definitely him like I'm going to control her. I'm going to put her with my very murderous brother because like the only thing we know about Percy's witchcraft at this point is he's basically like doing necromancy. He's like killing people and bringing them back. Exactly what Medea just said, like, "Oh, I was able to do that with lambs at 10."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then don't they say something about how his wife is like tied up?
He keeps her in chains. Yeah, a goddess of Sumeria. I couldn't find that anywhere who they're referring to, so I might have to do more digging. Although I have a feeling that Percy's is only going to come up peripherally. I don't see her actually running into him again.
I hope not.
Yeah, but she also remembers Pasiphae words here. Do you know what I had to do to keep him happy? Which, like, I do think she understands at least that brother is like, "Ugh, I never want to fuck with him."
Yeah, to say the least.
Yeah. Um, And so Circe remarks, "It's strange, Aedes always hated Percy." And Medea says, "Not now. They're closest friends, and when Percy visits, they talk of nothing but raising the dead and bringing down Olympus." Um, and so she's like asking, and for all the while, Jason's been here but drugged up in the background. She's like, "So does Jason know all of this?" And she's like, "Of course not. Every time he looked at me, he would think of poisons and burning skin. A man wants a wife like new grass, fresh and green." Um, and Jason's like not even flinching. He's just sitting there, basically like comatose.
Mm-hmm.
Um, let's see. So she wants to leave pretty quickly after this. She says, "My father pursues us still. We must leave at once and drive on to Iolcus. They have an army not even he can stand against, for the goddess Hera fights with them. He'll be forced to turn back, then Jason will be king and I'll be queen at his side." But Jason's like, he starts to come out of it at some point. It's not quite yet, but let's see. So Circe remarks, "Are you sure that this is what Jason wants?" And she says, "You suggest he does not love me?" She says, "He's still half a child and full mortal. Besides, he cannot understand your history nor your witchcraft." "He does not need to understand them. We are married now, and I will give him heirs, and he will forget all this like a fever dream. I will be his good wife, and we will prosper." Um, and then she basically warns her of what's to come. Circe warns Medea. She's like, "Look, you're going to go back to Iolcus, and they're not going to respect you there. Not only are you a witch, but you're a foreigner. People are going to treat you like shit. It's like, they'll resent you. Worse, they'll suspect you." And, like witchcraft in the sense that this family does it has been virtually unheard of before this. And so it's even more scary because it's brand new. I mean, like part of the xenophobia that happens with her character is nothing that we don't know in modern times, where it's like, I don't understand this person of another descent. I don't understand their customs, and it's scary to me. Like a good example, I mean, this wasn't a foreign person doing it, but like when we don't understand a concept, it is very, very scary to us. Did you see the like viral thing that happened here recently of some girl saying she thought that a hairdresser put a spell on her? Did you happen to catch that
I
TikTok
heard of
drama?
that, but I didn't even want to find out what it was because that it's stupid.
I'll give you the too long didn't read version. So this girl has only ever gotten haircuts from her mom before, which is the craziest part of this. Decides to go into this one TikTok viral hairdresser who, like, it seems to be very respectful from the videos. Like, one of the things that they got viral for was they'd ask for consent to touch people before the haircut. And
Mm-hmm.
everyone's like, "Well, you can't really give them a haircut if you don't touch them." But it was very making a show of, we ask people their pronouns, we ask if we could touch them. And so she goes into this place, she gets a haircut, doesn't necessarily like it. So she's like, "Hey, I think I need something fixed up. Can I come back in and get this fixed?" They say yes, but when she comes in, she sees something that to her looks like a voodoo doll. She sees pentagrams all around the room. There's salt surrounding her chair, a line of salt. And she's like, "Oh my gosh, they're doing voodoo on me." That's what she came on to TikTok and said in her video. And so, of course, people that know a little bit more about witchcraft were like, "Salt's for protection, and they're sealing
Mm-hmm.
you within the salts." So that kind of seems like they were trying to ward off your bad vibes. The pentagram is for protection. That's not a voodoo doll, like, and voodoo is very particular. It's an African sect of witchcraft, of magic, of that kind of thing. And so using that kind of term, especially because there are white people in the salon, she's like, yeah, people were like, "Yeah, this seems Wiccan, maybe."
Mm-hmm.
But it was that kind of concept. This girl saw all of this stuff she was not familiar with and was like, "Oh no, bad things are happening." Yeah.
They're not.
And so people think that of Medea. I mean, does she make bad things happen? She does. So it's somewhat warranted, although I don't think there's any myths of like what her time on Yolkis was like before Jason found a new girlfriend. So we don't know if she was causing trouble there too, but word had spread about some of the things that she did before she got there. So it didn't necessarily matter if she was on her best behavior.
Yeah. And also, like, she's the only person in that entire place that looks like her. Like, have you
Yes.
ever heard English people talk about anyone who's not white,
Yeah.
especially in their country? It'd be that kind of a thing.
Yeah. So Cersei's putting a really good point out here, and Medea just doesn't go for it. She's like, nope. What do you think? We're gonna hold hands and have a sleepover? Basically, the same thing Pasiphae ended up saying because Cersei's like picturing, I'll take this girl under my wing, I'll save her from this stupid man, and we'll be good. We'll do spells together. I'll teach her. She like even offers her. She's like, look, your dad told me when I asked him for help that this isn't the kind of thing that can be taught, but he was wrong. Let me teach you. And Medea's like, no, we're leaving. Fuck that.
Yeah. One thing that Cersei definitely hasn't learned yet is that you have to, like, some people aren't ready
Hmm.
yet. And you can't, like, make them be ready. You can warn them what you think might happen so
Yeah.
that when things start happening, you can, they might notice it. They might remember what you said, exactly like how she's remembering everything her sister said in these
Hmm.
chapters, and she didn't listen to her either. So it's
Yeah.
like you can't get that upset because you didn't listen either.
Yeah.
But you can do that kind of stuff, but you have to like let them figure it out on their own. They'll come
Hmm.
back when they actually want to talk to you about it. This chapter is just her just like trying to force it because she wants it with
Yeah.
Medea when Medea very obviously isn't ready yet. She's not ready to give up on the idea of things working out with Jason, and that's fine. Like she'll figure that out. Like she would have figured that out eventually. But Cersei is just like so I don't know, like over the top almost about it in this sort of way that she's just like, "What are you doing? Like this isn't like a family reunion. I'm stopping here so that your murderous brother will like not be able to find me before we get to like where he's from."
Hmm.
Like there's so many bigger things happening right now. I don't have time to like indulge in like your fantasies about like womanhood and companionship.
Yeah. Well, Cersei's final kind of plea is Jason really only loves himself. He's only going to be looking out for his own self-interest once you get to your destination. So there's no point in trying with him. And Medea, she says, um, Jason would never listen to such slander. I delivered him the fleece. He loves me. And Cersei thinks to herself, those are two different things. You did deliver the fleece. He doesn't love you. Yeah. Um, let's see. Um, so yeah, she keeps trying to get her to stay, but Medea says, "Look, if you keep me here, I'm gonna fight you too." And Cersei thinks, like, yeah, she probably would, and she'd
Mhm.
fight the whole world if she had to. She kind of senses that in her. But the spell on Jason starts fading at this point. And so she's saying, I'm not going to keep you against your will. Um, she leads Jason back to the shore and they take off again. Um, let's see. But pretty soon after that, let's see. Because we have a nighttime. And then when dawn breaks, she sees Aedes' ship. And Aedes is coming. He's steering the boat by magic, which Medea had also said something of like he's controlling the winds. She sees him with his hand out. He's yelling, stop. Um,
It made
and
me think of the scene in The Mummy.
yeah, yeah. um, So boy mom over here says a pleasure rose in me so old and sharp it felt like it felt like pain. When she notices him, he says, "Circe, my daughter came here." Yes, she did. Um, he seems happy about it, and he says, "I knew she would. She's desperate. She sought to bind me, but she is bound herself. Her fratricide will hang upon her all her days." Um, and let's see. So she said, "I grieve for your son's death. She'll pay for it. Send her out." And Circe tries to change the subject at this point, where he's like, "Okay, give me Medea then." Um, she's like, "Oh, so I met Daedalus," and he's like, "That dude's been dead for a while. Why are you bringing him up?" Um, yeah, and so he's like, "Just give her to me." She says she's not here anymore, and he gets mad at her for like, why didn't you hold her for me? Like, you obviously knew I would come and get her after everything she did. Why didn't you keep her here? And she, let's see, she doesn't really say anything after that. Um, just hold on. This part, I kind of just like, I felt so bad for her that I don't think I retained a lot of it. Let's see. So she's like thinking to herself, I had already lost him. The fact that he's this angry right now at me. He was never the person I thought he was. I think that this is like her first real hint of it because she's trying to have a moment with her brother. He's like, I don't care. I just want to go kill my daughter.
Yeah.
Let's see. He says when he finds or after he yells at her and she kind of has this moment of like, what am I gonna do? Am I gonna ask for forgiveness? Say that Medea tricked me? Like, she just, he says, "Did you hear me? I should punish you." And she says, "No. In Colchis you may work your will, but this is Iea." And then he says, "You've done nothing. I will have her in the end. This may be true, but I don't think she will make it easy. She is like you, Aedes, as oak to oak. She must live with that, and so it seems must you." And then he gets back on his boat and he takes off.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, it's so unsatisfactory because you know that Medea was waiting for it, and like we all knew that Aedes was never gonna be who she thinks that he was, but the fact that this is the one time he comes to her island and all that happens is he yells at her and then goes away. It's just like, what do you need to see that your brothers are assholes, girly?
I don't know. Because, like, he showed up there thinking there's no way that Circe won't do exactly what I want her to do.
Hmm.
And she, like, to be fair, she wanted Medea to stay there with her. Not for,
Yeah.
like, her brother's sake, but she wanted her to stay there. So she was wanting to do what he wanted. Um, that's the thing that's so frustrating about her. And I understand it's part of, like, her character story in this book, but it's really frustrating to read where you just want her to, like, stop doing this. Like, will you just, like, wake up? But she will not.
Yeah, unfortunately not. So in the next chapter, this is where we get the Prometheus in the beginning mention. So Hermes, she was waiting for him to come again so that she could hear what happened to Jason and Medea after this. And she doesn't like in a way that Pasiphae's words didn't really penetrate her and the like how they should have. Medea's did because she talks about um how Medea called her out on being lonely. Like, that's the reason you want to keep me here and teach me. It's just because you're fucking lonely. Like, I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to be here on this exiled island with you. No.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but let's see. So, as she's sitting there thinking about this encounter, she says, that old sickening feeling had returned, that every moment of my life I had been a fool. But that's when she starts thinking of Prometheus. She's like, but I helped Prometheus. I know I shouldn't have, but like, let's see. How long would I cling to that handful of minutes trying to cover myself with it as some sort of threadbare blanket? It didn't matter what I had done there. Um, Done then. Prometheus was on his crag and I was here. So he's still on the rock getting his liver eaten. And it's interesting that like this talk with Medea is the first time where she's like, I mean, I did help Prometheus, but why am I still thinking about this?
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Eventually, she she wakes up one day to a dark-haired, dark-eyed girl in her presence. It turns out to be a naiad named Alki, and she says first thing to Circe, "I came to serve you." And Circe's like, "Wait, what?" Like, why would you come here? And she's like, "Well, I'm Alki. Isn't this Iea? I'm here as a punishment." And so she's been sentenced to be a servant of Circe. Sentenced by who? I've not heard of such a thing. Speak. What power sent you? The great god sent me. Zeus? No, my father. And who is he? And Circe says she named some minor river lord in the Peloponnese. I think this is the river Sangrius. There's no huge mythology here. It's just I was looking at a list of naiads to see if any of them
Mm-hmm.
lined up. That's probably who it is. There's no major mythological story, but she did take an actual naiad that's at least mentioned by name. So that was interesting. So she asks her, "Why were you punished?" "I fell in love with a mortal, a noble shepherd. My father disapproved, and I must do a year's penance." So Circe welcomes her, and let's see. She says, "When I offered her food, she turned her head aside like a sulky baby. When I tried to speak to her, she folded her arms and pursed her lips. They only opened to voice her complaints about the smells of the dyes bubbling on the stove, the lion hairs on the rug, even Daedalus's loom." Circe then, she realizes this girl's miserable. She's like, "Go home. Like, I'm saying you are free. You don't have to serve me." And she's like, "I can't. You're not the one who levied this punishment, so unfortunately, you're not the one who can take it away."
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, so Circe finally has a companion on this island in this naiad, and even though she wanted to be a companion with Pasiphae and later with Medea, she hasn't yet like I don't know, opened herself up to the possibility of creating that type of environment with anyone else. I mean, we know Medea's immortal and she's able to do some of this magic. I don't know how this magic system works, if like you have to have some innate ability in order to tap into it, or if you can just tap into it if you listen hard enough to the humming of the plants and stuff. She's not very clear on it, but we do know both divine and non-divine people can do it. So it's like, could she start teaching this girl? Could they have their little sleepover moment? She's just too wrapped up in "I want my family to love me" to even think about that.
Yeah. And I that's what I was just thinking in this chapter when after this girl, other like naiads start showing up and stuff that other
Yeah,
gods have sent to like be punished basically by being on her island. And I
yeah.
just kept thinking like she's the last chapter she was talking about how she's lonely. This
Mhm.
entire book she said she's wanted like some sort of like companionship with women, and now here are these women showing up on her island. They're going to be there for the next year, but she hates all of them. And and like and like when I thinking about from their perspective how she talks to them, like tells them like don't leave anything out where I have to know that you're here.
Mhm.
Don't ever speak to me or make any noise when I'm around. I don't want to know when you're here and basically act like you're invisible because I don't want your presence here. Like she's basically acting like how she imagined like Pasiphae would act.
Pretty much.
And I'm like, hello? Like
Yeah.
these people are showing up and they're having to be there and you're telling them like that if you hear them at all that they're alive or you see that they left anything out that you're going to punish them somehow when they aren't allowed to leave this island and so they can't get away from you if you decide to do that. And it's just like,
Yeah.
okay. And it's just like watching her like make these decisions and having zero self-awareness. None.
Seriously. Yeah, so the people that get sent to her island are all these lesser nymphs. So dryads, oreads, naiads. Um, so trees, mountains, and lakes slash rivers. So you have to wonder, like, they could potentially tap into this stuff. Like they're literally nature spirits. How you can't tell me like a dryad, a tree nymph, isn't gonna know you could go to this tree and this tree might have this kind of power to it.
And even
So
if they couldn't, they
yeah,
could teach her like give her ideas of like new things that she could try from the
yeah,
things that they do know about nature and stuff, but she doesn't even get that far.
yeah. So next we have the end of her situationship with Hermes. And I was a little proud of her for like the reason she finally calls it off. It was he was giving a little bit too much Gemini man, in my opinion, in this next scene. So he comes and he's like, "So what's it like having all of these lesser gods around you now? Um, I bet you're happy." And he tells her that her dad is like actually encouraging fathers to send their daughters as a punishment. It's kind of another way of Helios flexing like I'm so cool, look at all this power I have. Um let's see. Tell my father I will do something awful to them if they do not leave. I will turn them into rats. And he said, "Can't imagine Zeus would like that. Weren't you already exiled for your acts against your kin? You should be beware further punishment." You can speak on my behalf, try to persuade him. And Hermes says, "I'm afraid I'm only a messenger." Which, like, isn't that what a messenger would do? Is speak on someone's behalf? Like,
They're just
you're
a
not necessarily
messenger.
coming new arguments. Just tell them that's what she says.
Hmm.
Um, so she tells him, "I don't want him here. Truly, I'm not being funny. Just get them off my island." Hermes is like, "Nah, you're being boring right now. They must be good for something. Take them to your bed." And she says, "That is absurd. They would run screaming." Nymphs always do, but I'll tell you a secret. They're terrible at getting away. And she thinks to herself, on Olympus, that joke would have landed. That joke would have been, haha, everybody's laughing at the fact that these naiads or these nymphs are easy to drag into bed and can't get away on their own. But she says after that, like, she goes into a white cold rage. She says, "I'm finished with you. I've been finished with you a long time. Let me not see you again." And that is how they end their situationship. So I was a little proud of her that she was like, "That's gross, disgusting. Get away, man."
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, she notices too that like him being the fucking Gemini man that he is, I'm gonna keep calling him a Gemini just because it feels like it fits, that he's getting amused by the fact that she got offended at this. And she's like, "Yeah, the stories about me are probably gonna get a little bit more wild coming from him these days
Hmm.
after this." But yeah, the nymphs end up remaining. She says they finish out their service and then others will take their place. Sometimes there are four, sometimes six or seven. They trembled when I passed, ducking, calling me mistress, but it meant nothing. I had been put in my place. A word and a whim from my father, all my vaulted power blew away. Not even my father, any river god, had the right to fill my island, and I could not stop him. So she feels like this is them trying to trample on her power once again, of like, well, we can send whoever you want we want to your island. And I do understand that in a sense. Like, in a way, she had become very accustomed to her solitude. She thought that was
Hmm.
part of her punishment for the longest time.
Yeah, and honestly, it could simply just be like these people are acting up, and this is the easiest way to solve this problem.
Yeah,
And so we're just going to do it because that's easier than figuring something else out.
yeah. She does remark, like, I'm glad at least it's the girls and not the boys. Sons were not punished. Um, which like there's so much you could say about just that line. Sons were not punished
Hmm.
alone. Um, there's the misogyny of the time, but there's also like the foreshadowing of what comes next. Because immediately after this kind of inner monologue, um, her little lioness dies. Her little familiar, unfortunately, just dies. She remarks that the lion seemed to have lived way longer than it should have. Like, there were multiple generations of lions at this point hanging around her. Like, that lion that she started out with had already had grandchildren who had grandchildren. Um, and so she has to hold a funeral for her lioness. Um, let's see.
Wait, um, that's like when I was like, you really want her to get raped? I don't
Yeah, because
know.
her
I don't
protection.
know why. Like, I'm honestly unsure as to why it happens the way that it does in this chapter and the
Mhm.
reasoning for why that was completely necessary. Like, it obviously kind of cuts off before we really see in a real way.
Mhm.
But I will say that when I saw that, I was like, oh, quite literally, the only reason to get rid of the lion is so that she can be raped.
Yeah.
Because if their lion was there, she wouldn't be.
Yeah,
And
the
I was
lion would
like,
have broken down the door. She says it herself.
this isn't even a good idea. Like, you literally just decided to like ceremoniously have it die for absolutely no reason because it's like, oh, I forgot. I gave her a protector, and so this can't happen to her if she has something protecting her. So it's just gonna die now. I was just like, this is so stupid. Like, I was just so annoyed. I'm like, this is just so transparent that this is the only reason why this animal is dying right now. And okay.
Yeah, like if your brothers and sisters are able to rise animals from the dead, like why is your familiar dying? And I know she didn't learn magic with them, but she knows this power exists. And the best that she does when she finds out that her lion dies is she like tries to put a potion in its mouth, like when it can't even swallow or anything like that. It's just like the most useless attempt ever.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, she has her funeral for the lion, and then it says basically she kind of acts the exact same. Um, she's out there making her dyes to dye the stuff that she's weaving. She is making her potions. Says the nymphs had fled from the stink, but I liked it of like her boiling stuff. Um, let's see.
Okay, I
So,
guess I'll say
yeah.
at this part, because this is like before anything, the next part happens. Um, it's frustrating that the next part happens the way that it does to me because Circe is like naturally doing things that she's like starting to figure things out
Hmm.
about how the world like works. And
Yeah.
so I was like, I don't understand then why you had her do this because she is like realizing things finally a little bit about her brother.
Hmm.
She's telling Hermes to fuck off. Like, she's starting to like understand that kind of stuff. And so it was like she was starting to get it.
Yeah.
Um, did you just did they just need her to do it faster? I don't know. I'm not sure about why she had her do it because I was just like frustrated by that because usually people have things like that happen in a story like this that is supposed to be like a feminist kind of focused thing. They usually have things like that happen if the character needs to like understand like how the world works and like treats women and things like that. But like she's starting to realize that on her own.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I'm just not sure about the why that happened the way that it did, I guess.
Yeah. So what happens next to kind of lead us into that part is a ship full of men come. And she says there were 20 of them, wind rough and shiny from the sun. They look a lot like what Glaucus looked like when he was a fisherman, is kind of how she talks about them. Um, so they tell her, "We're hungry and lost, and hope such a goddess as yourself will help us in our need." Um, so she welcomes them in, she feeds them, does the whole, hosting them thing that's expected. And let's see, she at first is like happy that there's mortals on her island because she says, "I could not stop smiling. The fragility of mortals bred kindness and good grace. They knew how to value friendship and an open hand. If only more of them would come, I thought. I would feed a ship a day gladly, 2 ships, 3. Perhaps I would start to feel like myself again." Um, but then things start to turn very sinister. She like notices that they're not treating her like a goddess anymore, that they're not like acting like she's a goddess anymore. And they start asking her about whether or not she has a man around. And
Mm.
I mean, she she kind of like the naivety here, because there have been so many moments with Circe where I've been like, "Girlie, don't tell that man that," right? With Glaucus, she tells him, "I don't really have powers." That could have went really badly. With these guys, she tells them there's no husband, there's no brothers, there's no father coming. And so that's what turns this interaction, is that they realize that she and these women are utterly alone on this island. Um, so they ask her for more wine. She goes to retrieve it, and she says when she comes back that she brought the best wine that she had from the finest vineyard. And let's see, she asks for their names. They say, "Tell us yours first." She says her name. And then the captain steps towards her. And the captain, this is the triggering part if you're watching later, is he pins her by her neck. Like forearm to her neck is kind of how I'm imagining it. Tears her clothes off, but the reason I point that out is because she says it's a practiced gesture. So this is kind of giving these are the type of men that rape and pillage everywhere they go, is what I think she's getting at with this. He kept his weight against her throat. Luckily, because she's a goddess, she doesn't need to breathe, but it keeps her from speaking. And so she says she's not sure why he did it because, like, it's not like there's anyone she could scream out to, but, like, maybe he just didn't want the screaming. Um, to kind of, like, skip forward a little bit, a mortal would have fainted, but I was awake for every moment. And she says that her throat was crushed inwards like a rotted log. So literally the amount of pressure this guy was putting on her, like just imagining that alone, because all of the other men are like, "Is she dead?" Like, I want to turn, "Is she dead?" And so people, I have to imagine this man has killed a girl doing this before, just because of the way the reaction is from the other men.
That is like the number one sign of domestic violence,
Hmm.
or that your life is in danger when they do things like that, because that it doesn't take very long to go like a little bit farther. But that
Yeah.
is like the statistic that it's something like 80 something percent of the time or something like that. If a man does that, then then they at least attempt to, even
Yeah.
if it's not successful. But yeah, that part I was just like, oh, that's interesting. That that's what you think that's like.
Yeah.
Because not to sound like, I don't know how this comes off to other people, but that's the kind of stuff that people don't know
Mhm.
about rape, because
Yeah.
that's, yeah, that is what it's like. Exactly. Like after I read these chapters, I could not, I was like nonverbal in that way. Like I don't know the right phrase, but the autistic phrase when you like can speak but you just suddenly can't. I
Mhm.
finished reading these chapters at like, I don't know, like 3 p.m. and I didn't say anything, like physically could not say anything until like 11 p.m. When somebody like sent me a voice note and I like tried to, and I like could actually respond. Um, but yeah, this is very accurate in a weird way to how that stuff happens. I'm not sure. And also, I will say, like, do people who make modern adaptations of Greek mythology know that it doesn't need to be proposed gang rape for it to be really bad?
Oh my gosh,
Like,
yeah.
why is it always gang rape? Like, why is it always multiple men wanting to rape, like, one girl? Do you know that it happening to just you one time with one person is bad enough? There doesn't need to be, like, it feels like they need it to be, like, over the top in this weird way as, like, as, like, the worst possible scenario or something.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, can you guys stop doing this? Like, one person is bad enough. You don't need like multiple men sounding like cartoon villains, being like, "Oh, is it my turn yet?" and things like that.
Yeah.
They can just be like, it can just be like one guy. And also, and like honestly, the more like accurate depiction of how like men who do this kind of thing and get away with it do is that usually it would be more accurate if the other men like went outside when
Mhm.
she was doing it, because a lot of times that's the kind of thing that happens. Like a lot of times when people tell stories from like college parties and stuff, is that the
Mhm.
other friends are like keeping watch almost for their friend, and they know what they're doing. They're not wanting to take a part in it exactly, but they just know what they're doing
Yeah.
and they're not stopping them. That would be like a more accurate depiction and would still be horrible. Like the men doing
Yeah.
this are still god awful, obviously. Um,
Mhm.
I just wish that they would stop being so like over the top, I guess, because
Yeah.
I feel like it makes people think like, oh, one person doing this to me isn't bad enough or something, and it's just like it it's bad enough with just one guy. It doesn't need to be like a gang of men like showing up to do this all to like the same woman. It can just be one guy deciding to like go for it in that horrible way and that being bad enough. Um,
Yeah.
it just bothered me.
Well, and she gave Circe a fail safe during this. So Circe, when she was serving them, she was like, "I don't know why I'm doing it, but I'm putting herbs into their food." And like almost then it happened by instinct. Now,
Hmm.
this is where I have to like criticize her magic system for not having concrete rules, not making sense. The one rule that seems to be a thing and why it's significant that she's getting strangled here is that the magic only works in this universe, in this telling, if you say a spell out loud somehow.
Hmm.
And so there's none of that, like, I mean, Harry Potter has it where you can learn how to do spells without speaking out loud,
Hmm.
which, like, it doesn't make sense to me that a witchcraft like this would need, like, actual speaking. There's no
Hmm.
stealth in that. Like, how do you stealthily do a spell? You
You
know?
can't.
And wouldn't you be more powerful if you could do it without saying some sort of stupid incantation?
Hmm. Yeah,
So,
that's when one of the things about comparing Percy Jackson and Harry Potter that's just
yeah.
like without the fascism is that the kids in Percy Jackson, the powers that they have, they just like have them. And that's
Mhm.
like the fun when Percy Jackson fans have the time of our lives going in on Harry Potter fans. I think that Percy would ever lose to anybody in Harry Potter
Nah.
because it's like he is just the son of Poseidon. He just can control water anywhere he is. He doesn't need to like get ready. And so like any fight with somebody in like
Mhm.
Harry Potter, even Voldemort, that he would have, Voldemort would be like getting his like wand out and Percy would already have like beaten him
Mhm.
because he just is that. He can just
Yeah.
do that without they can just do that stuff without even trying. All the other kids can too. And so there isn't like this build up to it or something in the
Yeah.
same sort of way. The so to end this like horrible chapter, it ends with her turning the men into pigs,
Yeah.
and this whole like next chapter too, I was just like, I don't know why she wants to do that. Why would you want them to be around? That's just like my interpretation of that. Of like, I wouldn't want them to be around. Like,
Mhm.
I wouldn't want them to be around me anymore, even if it is like fun, feeling like you like turn them into an animal and they can't get away from you. It's like, can't you just? I know this is literally like her story in the Odyssey, but I was like, wouldn't you rather like turn them into fish or something and just like throw them in the ocean, so you
Yeah.
never have to see them again? Because I would never want people who had tried to do that or did do that to me still around me at all.
Yeah.
I don't. That's one of those things. Of I know that's like her story. So like, no matter what Madeline Miller wrote, that's like what Circe is going to do because that is what she does.
Mhm.
But just like from my perspective, I'm just like, I don't think I would. I just don't think I would want to do that.
I always
Um,
assumed she was just treating them like actual, like livestock, that that's what she's feeding the rest of the men that come later. Like you're eating a crew that came previously.
mhm,
Um, But yeah, so she, once this guy lets off of her, she's finally able to say the incantation. The people go through a horribly painful transformation from the sounds of it.
mhm,
And, like, I'm not going to say it's not deserved, at least a little bit in this case. At least she's not doing it to somebody who's completely out of there. But the
mhm,
reason I brought up the magic system not making sense and, like, the whole fact that they have to say the incantations out loud, this scene would have been just as effective if it was attempted. Like, if it was
mhm,
just an attempted rape and she was able to stop it by saying the spell sooner.
mhm.
It doesn't lose its efficacy. And so by having it, oh, you need to say the incantation out loud, and then like she's not able to say it until the first guy jumps off of her. That's just unnecessary in my opinion.
Yeah, and I will say like this part. I felt like what Madeline Miller was trying to do was like have her slowly learning things, understanding things more over time, but like this thing happening to her that kind of like pushes her over the edge.
Hmm.
But it also pushes her over the edge where she's now like completely the other direction in a way that isn't good either. But I felt
Yeah.
like she was having her like slowly be presented with these situations and not really wanting to completely believe it. Even in this scene,
Hmm.
she's like trying to please them in a weird way and she doesn't even know like why she's necessarily doing it, but she still is like trying to have them like her in some way. And so there's
Yeah.
just so I know she was trying to present it as like there's just something in her that like always wants to please men because that's the way that their entire society is based on. And so she just can't completely like let that go until something like that happens to her. But it is true that even if it was like an attempted thing and but she stopped them, that would have the same effect and then I wouldn't have had to read all that.
Yeah.
Um and I wouldn't have had to like the next chapter when she's talking about her like bruise on her neck and stuff. I'm like, can you stop? Like nobody ever mentioned
Yeah.
that. Nobody ever mentioned that trigger warning. I after I read these chapters, I went back and googled all the different trigger warning websites. There's like 5 of them that I found and none of them ever mentioned strangulation. I fucking hate you guys. Cuz that's like the
Yeah.
worst. That's the worst one that I have and it's like, well, of course it's in this book. And no one ever warned me about it even though I was warned about everything else. Somehow
Yeah.
that one just like doesn't get written down on any of those trigger lists and I'm just like Jesus Christ, like why?
Yeah.
That's I that's one of those things where like when I was reading this I'm like I realized that most of the time people who don't list that they probably don't because they don't realize how men do that when they do that and so they don't realize that that's like one of the biggest ones.
Yeah.
for people that have had that happen before. And I realize that that's why that they don't realize it, but it is just one of those things that's frustrating
Yeah.
because I hate it when that one shows up because it's always the hardest one for me personally to just like let go of because it's like, ugh, I hate that. But either way, I don't know. I don't know why she like wants to keep all of these horrible men on her property as pigs.
Yeah. So the next chapter, let's see, it opens up with her first saying, um, well, first she goes through this like I mean, this I feel like does sound like things that I've heard of. She wants to like clean her own flesh after to the point where
Oh
she's
yeah,
like scrubbing herself with sand and like blood's coming up. She thinks that her Aunt Celine would have seen what happened and maybe she said something to her dad and maybe her dad's gonna come and think, poor child, poor exiled daughter, I should have never let Zeus bring you here. But she knew. She like also then says like I knew that wasn't gonna happen. Um,
that part. Okay, I will say one thing I forgot to say before is that I think this is just like my own theory. They've never. I doubt they're gonna actually say it in the book, but it feels like Hermes was like stopping men like this from going to her island, and
I was thinking that
now that she's not around him anymore, now he's not stopping any of these men from finding her, which is like fuck you.
he's the god of traveling, so
Yeah,
there's like
seriously fuck you for like just letting those kind of people find her now because she doesn't like you making rape jokes.
yeah, and with like Circe, Aea, I think like I want to say is it Sicily that people say is Aea? I mean there's a pinpointed like Roman spot, but like Aiea is not theoretically, like Ogygia, where Ogygia, it's said in the text, it's so far away, there's no men there, none of the gods go visit except for occasionally Hermes because, like, it's that far away. Aiea is never described like that, and multiple heroes visit Circe. So Jason, Aeneas, and Odysseus being the big three, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So yeah, it does seem like this, like whatever, for whatever reason, dumping Hermes opened the floodgates for something like this. It's
Mm-hmm.
so weird.
And the other thing I was going to say about that part is it is so frustrating because your sister literally told you that would happen. Like she
Yeah.
told you, like it's as like the Pasiphae is like older than her.
Hmm.
And so for me being like the older sister in this situation, I just get so annoyed every time she says this stuff because it's like, why didn't you listen to her? Your older sister told you that her brother was doing that to her. Like it was bad enough having her go through that one time. Imagine what it's like when it happens many times.
Yeah.
And so her sister went through that and told her, Dad's not going to help you. Dad's not going to stop you. Dad's not going to rescue you.
Hmm.
And and still like during this part I get wanting to believe that they will, but it's also just that frustrating thing of like, why didn't you believe her?
Yeah.
She tried to warn you about literally everything and you just didn't. It's so frustrating because it's like, why won't you just listen to me
Yeah.
about these people? Like just listen to me and just believe me about these people for the love of God. And until um I get really frustrated whenever I get reminded
Hmm.
that most of the time people don't fully accept or like believe you unless something like that has actually happened to them themselves,
Yeah.
because that's just so depressing to me because it's like, so this is never going to get any better then, because the only way anyone ever actually believes you is if they've gone through it themselves. Like that can't be possible. I cannot, like, I literally cannot believe that, because it's like, well, then what is the point of even trying?
Yeah.
Because, like, people should be able to figure this stuff out and believe you without having to actually go through it themselves and realize that this stuff is true. And I know that that's basically what Madeline Miller is doing with Circe all these people tried to warn her about men in general in all these different ways, and she just like didn't listen to any of it because she just like couldn't break through like the conditioning until something like that happened to her. um
Mhm.
I just really don't like that idea because it's like, but most
Yeah.
people don't experience what I did, and I don't want them to. Like, it makes me one of those things with like me making like friends or even like people who just want to approach me. I'm always just like waiting for them to tell me something absolutely horrifying that somebody they're related to did to them. It always happens. Like, at some point since I was in high school. It always happens. Like, one of my best friends that I made when I was in high school, we were friends for like a year, and then she suddenly told me that her mom was being sexually abused by her dad growing up, and that her mom like was that was one of her mom's biggest fears of something like that happening to her. And I remember just sitting there and staring out the window like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, she had never mentioned that entire time, and I was like, how is it possible that this is the person I became like best friends with organically out of a completely different situation? We just both liked theater, and that's like how we became friends. But I was just like, this is ridiculous. And it's that kind of thing has just happened since I was that age. Every time
Mhm.
someone's close to me, there's something like that somewhere in their family somewhere. And it's just weird, but it's also like, I just want to believe that somebody will like hear what we say and believe and understand what we're trying to say, that will help
Mhm.
them keep themselves and other people, especially kids in their life, safe without them actually like directly experiencing something, because it's
Yeah.
just depressing to think about that, because I don't want I don't want all these victims. I want people to like find a way to protect themselves before it happens.
Yeah. Well, and I will say, so Pasiphae is actually supposed to be younger here, but she comes off as older because Cersei's so, like, she's so damn naive. And so this is like another extension of her naivete, and this is like really the only time when she starts thinking back to her past and being like, "Oh yeah, I it's crazy that that didn't happen sooner. My uncle's eyes used to crawl over me as I poured their wine. Their hands found their ways to my flesh, a pinch, a stroke, a hand slipping under the sleeve of my dress. They all had wives. It was not marriage they thought of. One of them would have come for me in the end and paid my father well."
Why didn't you
So,
believe Pasiphae when she told you that?
yeah, Pasiphae literally told her, and she just disregarded it because of the messenger. Um, let's see. So, yeah, she cleans up her house. Let's see. What is the next part? So they came, I cannot say why, some revolution of the fates, some change in trade and shipping routes, some scent upon the air, a wafting. Here are nymphs, and they live alone. The boats flew to my harbor as if yanked by a string. The men splashed to shore and looked around, pleased. Fresh water, game, uh, fish, fruits, and I thought I saw a hearth smoke above the trees. Is that someone singing? So yeah, men start coming in droves. And what we find out about how she is doing this, or she's going about like these visitors now that this has happened, is she kind of vets them. She tries to see like, do these seem like good men? And if they don't, she does her whole turn them into pigs thing. The ones that are pious, she kind of dives into hypersexuality as a way to like deal with what has happened to her. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's essentially what is happening here. She says, um, "It was a sort of rage, a knife I used upon myself. I did it to prove my skin was still my own. And did I like the answer I found? Leave," I told them. So basically, she's doing it numb and doesn't get anything from this, even like trying to be like, well, look, I'm owning this. This is me.
Mm-hmm. The way that people either respond is they're either very hypersexual, where they do it to like convince themselves that it wasn't actually that bad, by
Hmm.
like having them do it again to be like, see, I can handle this, or that wasn't actually that bad of an experience because I can just do it again. And so that means I'm not as upset about what happened to me as it
Yeah.
seems. Or you're like me, where you are like, I will never do that ever again.
Yeah.
Ever. And it there's that's pretty much most of the reactions is like one extreme or another. But this part I wanted to talk about because um, when you go through stuff like this, people have like stages
Hmm.
is like the best way I know how to put it. Like when I said that like Medea is wasn't ready earlier, that was like you can tell people that are in like certain stages
Hmm.
where they're just they need to be like believe in whatever they need to believe at the time, even if there's a part of them that knows it's not going to work out. They just need to believe in it. They're not ready to like acknowledge that it's not going to happen yet. They just need to. And I see people like that all the time online. I usually end up not following them just because it's hard, like watching somebody in that sort of stage until
Yeah.
they realize. I kind of one of those things I do is I a lot of even people that I've like blocked before and stuff. I usually go back and like try to check in on them like years later if I can remember their username and stuff just to see if they're doing okay or like are doing better now. Like have figured some more stuff out. Um, the stage that she's in, though, right now is going completely the other direction,
Hmm.
where instead of, which is very common, like when you learn, when you start like actually working through what happened to you, if you're somebody like me anyway, that didn't for a really long time, even if you're not, like even if it happened to you and you ignored it for a little while and then you start like trying to deal with it, when you like almost like let yourself just be like angry about it or just acknowledge how bad it actually was, you usually
Yeah.
end up going completely the other direction where before she was like arguing with Medea about her brother, you know, being a monster and things like that. And now she's like the men that are coming to her, if they say the same sentence as the men that hurt her, then she's just like, oh, they're the same as those men, so I'm just going to turn them all into pigs. And it's like, you don't know that.
Yeah.
Every man who asks you if you're alone, they could just be making fucking small talk. And
Yeah.
you don't know that. You don't actually know that. And it's the thing that a lot of victims do where they go through something like that or they acknowledge that that happened and so then afterwards they're like all men are like that. And so if a man does or says this like small thing that reminds me of the person that harmed me, then that means that they're like that man. And it's like, no, it doesn't. It doesn't. And like I figured that out in my life. Like just because somebody reminds me of him doesn't mean that they are like him. They're
Yeah.
not. They're just another man that looks like him or sounds like him or says something that reminds me of him or whatever. It doesn't mean that they're the same. And so it's like I feel like the end part of the chapter when Odysseus's people show up and then he shows up, it's like making that point of like I don't think Odysseus's men would have done that to her.
Yeah.
And she turned them into pigs and it's like how many of those men out there wouldn't have done that to her, but she's so sure that they are that she just does it to them anyway.
Yeah.
And it's like
Madeline's
going way the other
ambiguous.
direction of like every man is not like a rapist. Like okay, I can't remember where this part happens. This just like this small little line, but it was one of those things that I was like, oh Jesus Christ.
Hmm.
Just to talk about like Madeline Miller for a second, because I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
she's a white woman. There's a line in there where she says it doesn't matter, like, it doesn't matter that she's like a god or
Hmm.
whatever, that men just like do it anyway because she's a woman that's alone. That is not true. That is, I was like a like you are a white woman and you wrote this, and I need you to not be such a white woman who wrote this because that is absolutely not true. Like even when you look in like the world right now, like yes, sometimes people who are privileged and have a lot of money are sexually abused, but it's not a situation like that where they most of the time when there are like super powerful women, they went through that when they weren't.
Hmm.
Like for instance, like Woody Allen did that stuff with his daughter when she was a small little kid. And
Yeah.
ironically, because she is Woody Allen's daughter, she got way farther than most people ever do, even though he was never found like guilty or anything for it. She like talked to the police. There's like video of 7-year-old her talking to the cops. The cops decided not to do anything because Woody Allen is Woody Allen.
Yeah.
But the only reason they ever like even like took her seriously is because it was Woody Allen's daughter. Otherwise they would never, they don't. Otherwise they wouldn't take you that seriously. But I just had to say that because I was just like, that's not true. Even with like the case that was just in the news about Diddy,
Hmm.
like the people, he specifically chose people that he had power over already. He didn't
Yeah.
do that to Jennifer Lopez. Like
Yeah.
he did that to people like Cassie and people who were his assistants, people who he could control already because they worked for him.
Hmm.
Like most of the time in the world, more powerful women do not experience that the same way that less powerful women do. They do notice that because
Yeah.
they don't want to get in trouble. Like, even if they don't care about anything else, they don't want to get in trouble.
Hmm.
And this is like a whole other subject, but men who do, or anyone, let's say anyone, because I hate it when people are only like, only men do this stuff, because that's not true. And I get very bothered by that. And so, anyone who does this kind of thing, they don't see themselves as like a predator or an abuser or whatever. They don't think that like what they're doing is wrong. I know that's
Hmm.
hard for people to accept, but they really don't. They like have reasons, justifications in their mind for why they do those things that make it okay to them, and they just think like if you would just do what I say, then I wouldn't be doing this kind of stuff like that. But it's just like they don't see themselves as like the scary one or the wrong one or the abusive one. And
Yeah.
so they're not they just they they know that they know what they want, and they think they figure out ways to get it, but they also know that like, oh, I don't want to possibly, even if they don't think that they've actually, like when men say like I never raped you, in most situations they actually believe that. When they're
Hmm.
saying that, that doesn't mean that that's like okay, um, or like
Yeah.
that they're correct or anything. But most of the time when they say that, they do actually believe that. But I'm trying to say that because men and like people, women in power, they sometimes are just like, oh, more people might find out about what happened, and they might like listen to her if she tries to say that it wasn't consensual, even though I know that it was.
Yeah.
And so like that's the kind of stuff that makes them like back off from people like that, because they don't, the worst thing to them is that their like reputation will be ruined.
Yeah.
And then they would lose like the power that they have for being part of like the patriarchy. And so they don't want to lose that power. And this is like an extension of them like showing that power. And so they just like, that's the way that they usually look at it. And so either way, I was just like, oh my god, that is 100% not true. It's not true at
Hmm.
all. And it just like, no, I need you to stop being like a white woman feminist for a second here, because that's not true. You can't like act like that is. Like Circe lived however long in her life without experiencing this,
Hmm.
because her dad is this powerful god,
Yeah.
and that people knew that if they did that to her, that it would be without his okay or whatever, that it would be a big risk. And so like
Hmm.
she did have like, that's one of the things with these stories, is that even as bad as what Pasiphae experienced was, like they did have a more like privileged experience of that experience because they are
Yeah.
still powerful people in this world. And I need people to know that. Because
Yes.
these sort of things happen to people that don't have this sort of power, and they can't do anything even in like this magical world. Like they're making jokes about all of the nymphs, like
Hmm.
that kind of thing likely happens to them all the time, and they don't have any like recourse to get back at any of them. Like
Yeah.
Pasiphae could do the spell, like, and also her turning all the men into pigs. I was like, you're acting just like your sister.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Like she was so like outraged about Pasiphae doing that spell on Minos. And I'm like, this is the same thing. It's
Yep.
like slightly different, but it's essentially the same thing of just turning them all into pigs and then like making them need to like jump off of her cliff and kill themselves if they want to get away from her. But it's essentially the same thing of of letting men basically walk into her trap in a way. And if they don't pass her test, just like immediately turning them into pigs and like leaving them there to rot.
Yeah.
It's honestly not that different from the stuff her sister was doing. And I just think that's really funny. That
Yeah.
the last set of chapters, she was like trying to convince herself after she got back home that she's not like her sister. And I'm like, you are, and it's
Yeah.
fine. It's fine that you are. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person. Um, but it's just interesting how that happened.
Yeah. So, hold on. There was something I was gonna say about the. Well, when she has them prove, like, or not has them, but when she's like testing these men, the parameters she says that makes them not safe men are, as you've already said, she asks, like, if they ask her, is there a man of the house somewhere? And for her, that's a red flag. But the other red flag is something that I don't see as dangerous in the way that she does, and it's like they're looking at her stuff,
Hmm.
essentially. And she's like, "Oh, these men just want to rob me and rape me, so I might as well." Um, but like if you go to someone's house, that's a pretty normal thing to do is like
Hmm.
take in your surroundings, like, "Ooh, look at this nice thing they have over here." Um, it's fairly normal. So I think mostly because she's had this solitude and because now every single experience with a mortal has not gone great, I just think like, yeah, this is her just not actually healing from the stuff that's happening.
No. And like to be honest, like that kind of thing, what she's doing with the men,
Hmm.
like that's what complex PTSD is. That's
Hmm.
why it takes so long what to go to like therapy if it at least if it happened a lot, but even if it happened only one time, I feel like
Yeah.
it takes a while because you pick up on cues to you that are a cue
Hmm.
of something that is not. And the only way for you to like realize that it's not is if you like give that person time to prove that they're not going to do the same thing, but that's absolutely terrifying. And
Yeah.
so like her thinking that the men just like looking at the things in her home mean that they want to like rape her and steal all of her stuff. That like she assumed that that's what the men that were there who did do that to her were wanting to do, but she doesn't even know if that's necessarily true. Men sometimes just want to rape women, and
Yeah.
they don't want to get anything from it besides doing it. And so the men who even did that in the first place might not have even wanted to steal her stuff.
Hmm.
And it's more of a thing of I thought that this part of the chapter was a really good like way of showing the like complex PTSD of it all of
Hmm.
these men are showing up on her island and they're like raggedy, their clothes are usually messed up, they're like tired, they're really hungry and starving, they've gotten like lost,
Hmm.
um and so they're like in this position. Usually when you see people like that, you want
Yeah.
to help them, but to her they're like automatically dangerous because that's what the men who did that to her said they were like was going on with them. And so men who are just like you know hungry and starving and are just looking for like some food or something before going back out are now seen as like these evil people to her. And
Yeah.
that's very much how that kind of stuff happens when you have that going on in your actual life, is like these little things just like alert you to danger and you don't even know most of the time if there is any actual danger. And
Yeah.
it's a really that's like the thing that takes the longest in therapy, is to try to like re see the world in a different way,
Hmm.
instead of feeling like the world is constantly like attacking you and the world is constantly trying to hurt you, instead trying to see it as like a neutral thing instead.
Yeah.
um I don't know if I see it like that sometimes.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a lot better than it used to be, but I don't know if I'll ever completely just be like, oh yeah, the world's totally cool.
Yeah,
Like
well,
I don't
there's
know.
there's unfortunately a lot of confirmation bias when you are in this mind state, because like one of the things Circe says to herself is that when people are asking if she's alone, that part of what they're probably thinking is like, if I were valuable to anyone, I would not be allowed to live alone. And
Hmm.
is there a kernel of truth to that? Like, her family doesn't give a fuck. There is a kernel of truth to it. But it's
Yeah.
not because she's not valuable. She's placing value in, like, does my family care about me as the same?
Yeah, and it also would be a thing. Sometimes people just ask that because they're just like, how did you end up here? Kind
Yeah.
of thing. Not like because they're trying to hurt you because you are alone. Um, but when you're in the place that she is, you're not even going to like take the chance to like give the person a chance to show it, which means
Hmm.
that you might be turning men that were never going to hurt you into pigs for the rest of their natural born life when they were never going to
Yeah.
hurt you. They were just talking to you. But that's like why, in a sum up thing, that's why I hate like the narcissistic abuse like sort of communities, for lack of a better word, I guess, on the internet, is that
Hmm.
they focus so much on giving like these different. Narcissistic abuse is just the same word twice. Abuse. Abuse is
Yeah.
just abuse. Narcissistic abuse is not any different than any other kind of what other what like, is there another name for like abuse? But if you don't call it narcissist, that's just so weird. It's just abuse. But they like give it like all of these like weird, like funny names, almost like terms,
Hmm.
almost like slang words or something. It's very interesting how they do that, but they do that kind of thing, and it automatically makes people that are kind of involved in that community feel like they need to be like on the lookout all the time, and they feel like they could be like,
Yeah.
oh, this person is doing this and this person is doing that. Most of the time they are not. And like my like thing that and also like you don't know, like I've had multiple people, at least 10 people on TikTok in the last like 5 years call me a narcissist
Ugh.
because of whatever. Like because I didn't believe in something that they said, or just like was saying like, you don't know if that person is actually as bad as you say they are. Half of them were because I was defending Amber Heard.
Yeah.
And I would always try to tell those people, like, just because Amber Heard reminds you of your abuser does not mean that she is as abusive as your abuser. You need to, like,
Hmm.
separate those feelings. Otherwise, you're out here, like, accusing a victim like her because she is one.
Yeah.
Like, the idea that people actually believe that a young, like, 24-year-old girl would ever be believed by anyone, anywhere, over somebody who is as powerful as Johnny Depp is, people's brains just start leaking when they are around like narcissistic abuse, because that's the only way that anyone would actually believe that anyone would, like, people didn't believe her as soon as she said it. There were people online saying that they didn't believe her and that they thought that he was a sad little victim,
Yeah.
because that's just how people are. They don't believe women ever. What do you mean? No woman could ever end a career like his. Brad Pitt is like on a tour for being in the new the F1 like race movies.
Oh gosh.
Like, his children changed their names because they don't
Yeah.
want to be associated with him that badly. None of them have seen him in person in like 15 years. Because of how abusive and violent he was towards them and their mother, and he's still out there like being like, I'm changed now.
Hmm.
Shut up. But like, either way, like the narcissistic abuse stuff is like it makes you afraid of the world. And like
Yeah.
the biggest like internet specific thing like that was what is her name, Elizabeth
Tekken
Teckenbrock.
Brock.
Yeah, that when that whole situation happened, they were like, oh, Elizabeth is a narcissist. And then when her husband posted videos, that's what they said. And then when she posted some video, I don't even know what she said in it, that made people, and Mama Tot of all people was like, no, she's a victim. I know a victim when I see her, and he's just a narcissist, and I know what those people look like. And suddenly they were all convinced that he was the one that was abusive, until they realized that she was the one that actually was, and they were wrong the whole time. You guys don't know what those people look like
Yeah.
because you're so afraid of people that you like can literally like find these tiny things that people do and tell and convince yourself that it means that they're bad. Like the fact that husband, his original video showed medical records of her saying that she had cancer and then her admitting in text messages that she'd never had cancer. And the internet for the next year and a half afterwards still believed that he was lying about that because she just said that he was in Scientology.
Yeah,
And I was
that
like,
was
it is
enough.
so easy to manipulate you guys when you are so busy being afraid of everyone else. It's so easy. It was so easy for her to do that, to give herself some time before like people re-looked at everything he said and realized like, oh right, like why didn't I believe this? And it's like that kind of a thing, like with how Circe is acting right now, that it's like if you see everyone, every situation is like dangerous and you're not able to like calm yourself down somehow and realize that just because this person is like doing something that reminds you of somebody that hurt you does
Hmm.
not mean that they themselves are actually going to hurt you. You just like, you make your world so small
Yeah.
because you just like won't let anybody else in because you're sure that they're going to hurt you that way too. And like maybe I'm a hypocrite because I don't like meet new people and go out in the world and stuff, but whatever. But I generally like understand that idea that like there are people that I run into sometimes that remind me of my dad. They're not my dad.
Yeah.
And I know that most men are not like him and they're not dangerous. Um, I will say like talking about Medusa is hard because sometimes people say stuff to you that just makes you think um like I want to believe that I can like leave the house and she's something that makes me think that maybe I can and that
Yeah.
I'll be like safe and stuff, and people trying to like take that away is makes that situation
Yeah, I
harder.
get so mad. Ugh.
And I just wish that they wouldn't because I just want to be able to like I've had agoraphobic stuff in a weird way since I was a kid. Like
Hmm.
I'm not really afraid of like enclosed spaces necessarily. I'm afraid of them if I don't have a way out. Like if I'm in a room that's like full of like a bunch of people and it's like blocking and they're like blocking the doorway, then that stuff happens because
Hmm.
I can't think of a way that I would get out of the room.
Yeah.
One thing that's funny in like my way is when my sister and I are places, she'll like sometimes ask me stuff like that of like if this would happen, what would we do? And I tell her exactly what we would do and she's like, "Okay."
Yeah.
Or like when we're in Chicago, there's tons of bridges in Chicago. 'Cause the Chicago River goes right through like downtown, and she would ask like, "What do you think would happen if I like fell off the bridge?" And I would tell her like, "You would hit the water, but you would be okay because you know how to swim." And I would call the police, and they would help you. And it's just like stuff like that because when you're in danger all the time, you just are thinking of that stuff. And
Hmm.
so I have a hard time, it's really hard for me to like leave the house when I'm not leaving the house with somebody that I already trust, which is literally like two people.
Yeah.
Technically four people. It's an aunt on both sides of my family, on my dad's side and my mom's side, my mom and my sister,
Yeah.
and that's it.
Maybe
And
Joey. Yeah.
yeah, he's like the same person with my sister basically, but he never comes to pick me up. Like my Joey, my sister's boyfriend and my mom's boyfriend for that matter, they don't come to get me without the other person being there. And
Yeah.
so I pretty much that's but like I leave the house when I'm like with them, which is like often lately now that they live so close by,
Yeah.
but that also means that there are like things that I would want to do like on my own and I legitimately cannot get myself to do them. Just like art things, like going to like try to go to like art groups or whatever, or like community. um a lot of art studios have like community nights like once a week or once a month where you can go there and just make whatever you want.
Yeah.
And I would love to go to something like that, but I literally I don't even try to go by myself because I know that I'm not going to. I've tried for like 5 years and I can't get myself to go by myself. The times where I have gone is when my mom goes with me. And I'm like, I'm fine with my mom going with me. Like, my mom took me to get my hair cut on Sunday. My mom
Hmm.
goes with me to all of my like dentist appointments. My mom just like with me to stuff. And
Yeah.
that's like how I go. This would be easier if I had a car.
Hmm.
It was a little bit easier that way when I did have a car, but it was still hard for me even when I had one to get myself to like go to things by myself. I would
Yeah.
usually end up deciding not to go. But it's that kind of stuff that's hard. It's hard to believe, especially because, at least for me, like being online like we are,
Hmm.
um, like the whole, I don't know another purpose I have in my life besides to try to help kids going through what I was know that you can survive by literally just like being here and existing and
Hmm.
proving that you can get to this age after going through that stuff, which doesn't seem possible when you're going through. I still
Yeah.
think I'm like, how am I 40? I honestly don't know how I am because I never thought that I would make it past like any age before this one. It's really weird that I am this age. It's very confusing. But beyond that, like because that is like the only thing that I feel like is like worth my time basically. Um, it means that I see a lot of people talking about this sort of stuff a lot
Hmm.
because when you talk about that, then you see videos about that. And I want to see videos like that. Like I want to see videos in that way of like kids talking about stuff like teenagers or like people in their early 20s. I want to see them
Yeah.
talking about it because I want to, even if I'm just like liking their video, I want them to know that like somebody at least has heard something they've said and
Hmm.
like believes them. Like I saw a video like yesterday of somebody talking about something that I forget what it was now, but they were basically talking about um, something that happened in their family with that sort of abuse happening. And in the middle of their video, they said like, I'm probably going to delete this later. And I'm like, yeah, that's usually what we do. And so I just like liked the video and I watched like the entire thing because I just feel
Hmm.
like that's like the least that I can do. But it
Yeah.
does mean that I hear a lot of those stories. And so like rationally, I know like the world isn't actually as dangerous of a place as I thought it was when I was growing up, that most people are not like him. There are other people like him, obviously. I see the people in the news and stuff, but I know that the
Hmm.
majority of people are not like him. But it's also hard to like sometimes remember that when you are seeing like people who have gone through that talk about what happened to them all the time. Like if I wasn't making content about that, I wouldn't be seeing as many people talking about that sort of thing. And it
Yeah.
might be easier to like forget that, but I also don't want to do that because um, those are the people I love talking to people like that. That sounds weird, but I
Yeah.
like know how to talk to people that are going through that sort of thing. Like I work at a call center for United Healthcare. My favorite phone calls is when somebody calls looking for a therapist and they're
Hmm.
usually like crying on the phone and or just like sounding overwhelmed and like scared, and I sit there and talk to them, and every time I've done that they start crying and being like, thank you for being so nice to me. And I'm
Yeah.
always like, who do I need to beat up in my company? Who's being mean to you? Because they
Yeah.
always are like, the other people I've talked to have been so rude that I just ended up hanging up during the phone call and not even getting to like the part of finding a therapist because
Oh.
they were being so mean. But like I just know how to talk to people like that. It's not even hard. When I'm
Hmm.
talking to people like that, it's I know exactly what to how to talk to them, and it's the easiest thing in the world when usually talking to people is not
Yeah.
easy at all. Those people I can talk to, and so I want to talk to them. But
Yeah.
it is like a hard thing to kind of balance that sort of thing. And it is interesting to like I don't know what I'll see what I think about this book as it continues on and like what I know the ending of this book. Like I know what Circe does at like the very end because I read that review a couple months ago, and I remember that the girl who read this book and like got rid of it after she read it because she didn't want it in her house anymore.
Hmm.
That she mentioned like something that happens at the end, and so I know what that is, and I'm just like I'm not sure what I think about this right now because overall the thing I'm trying to get across is that don't like I just don't like that she's turning all these people into pigs, I guess. It
Yeah.
the only way I know how to put that in a way that like doesn't sound like I'm like being like, "Oh, you're going after men when you shouldn't be" kind of thing. It's more of a thing of like sometimes people get stuck on the like phase
Hmm.
and it's like that sort of thing of like you're spending all this you're like they're at your house all the time. So you're constantly going to be reminded of what happened to you even more than you already would be just by like existing after that happened to you. And so it's like a thing of like they're there all the time around you, and you're constantly being reminded every time you see them why they're there. And it just like keeps you in this like cycle where you are so focused on the people that hurt you. You spend so much time thinking about them
Hmm.
that you're not really thinking about yourself. And you're not
Yeah.
really like thinking about what is actually best for you yourself. Because she's not thinking about herself, because like having a reminder of those men is not is not good for her. It's not, she doesn't need that. It would be better if she didn't have a reminder like that all the time. And her entire life during this chapter is like revolve around just like thinking about getting back at like the men that did this to her, which understandable. But sometimes people just like get stuck in that
Yeah.
stage, and they some people never move past that stage. And like
Yeah.
the part even with Odysseus in this chapter is her in that stage still, I'll say.
Yeah, so to get back to the story a little bit, like going back to the nymphs, especially when we know this universe is so terrible to nymphs that this has probably happened to some of the ones that are sitting there on her island doing their
Hmm.
year of service. Um, like she literally at one point, like when someone comes, one of the nymphs is like, shall we all go back to the room? She's like, yeah, I'll deal with them. But like, why are you not interacting with these girls who are also literally facing the same danger? I mean, if they can lay harm to you somehow, they can make their way all the way up to the girls if we're thinking in
Hmm.
the worst case scenarios.
And also like I was thinking earlier, like imagine how scared those girls are. Like
Yeah.
they end up on, they have to be on this island, they can't leave. She refuses to like speak to them and says that if they she can hear their presence that she'll hurt them. And then when they're there, they just see her turn all of these men into animals. And it's
Hmm.
just like, oh my god, she might turn me into that if I do the wrong thing. Like she
Yeah.
has like no idea how scary she is.
Yeah. So, and like the thing playing in her head here is what Hermes had said, his little joke that she snapped at. We were an endless feast laid out upon a table, beautiful and renewing, so very bad at getting away. Like them all being nymphs.
Hmm.
And so she's stuck in this not only because of it happening, but it I do have like I feel like we have to acknowledge that her reality at least has made a confirmation bias type like thing of like yeah, it might keep happening.
Hmm.
So then we like I don't understand why Madeline wrote it this way because we get like it's literally a tiny section here that's about Odysseus before we actually get to Odysseus, where she's thinking about how like oh there was a man who wasn't a super pious man but he was super smart who once asked me why pigs and she's like I don't really have a reason for why pigs why not let's see these were answers for me but I bear no hold on where is it after I changed the crew, I'd watch them scrabbling and crying in the sty, falling over each other, stupid with their horror. They hated it all their newly voluptuous flesh, their delicate split trotters, their swollen bellies dragging in the earth's muck. It was humiliation and debasement. They were sick with longing for their hands, those appendages that men used to mitigate the world. Come, I would say to them, it's not that bad. You should appreciate a pig's advantages. Mud slick and swift, they are hard to catch. Low to the ground, they cannot be easily knocked over. They are not like dogs, they do not need your love. They can thrive anywhere, on anything, scraps and trash. They look witless and dull, which lulls their enemies, but they are clever. They will remember your face. Um, the truth is, men make terrible pigs. But, like, the truth be okay, so this is just one of my classicist rants is that like it's very very like to a T in the text she turns men into pigs because she thinks that that is men's true forms like and we've heard the true form thing come out with like Scylla but why did that get thrown away for these men and she's like well they didn't like being pigs but whatever being a pig has its advantages. And I don't know if it's because Scylla maybe like traumatized her so much she doesn't want to think she's doing something that's already there.
Mm-hmm.
But almost every classics teacher approaches the Circe like episode of the Odyssey as like, is she correct in a way? Are men pigs? Like, is she making a commentary that, like actually is worth exploring? And Madeline just takes all of that out and just like, no, they don't really like being pigs. It's a horrible transformation. And when they escape me, they jump off a cliff and die. Yeah, that was so weird.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a weird change for her to do.
Mm-hmm.
She loves changing people's like whole thing. Like, I'm still mad that Achilles was not angry in Song of Achilles. This Circe no longer thinks she's changing people into their true form. Why? Why?
Mm-hmm.
At least if she had that, it would be a compelling motivation. Her
Mm-hmm.
being like they don't even like it. It's like, okay, but why? Why?
And honestly, that would like make sense. Like when you're traumatized like that, especially when you like don't, you haven't like realized that you're like afraid of everybody, and so you're accusing like innocent people of things that they probably weren't gonna do. You
Yeah.
do feel like you know who they really are on the inside, and that you could never be convinced that you're wrong.
Hmm.
And so that does actually make sense. So I'm not sure why she does that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So then we get to actually Odysseus's crew landing, and what she notices is that they camp on the beach instead of like going to where they see the fire coming out of her little like palace house thingy.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually some of them do come, and she goes through her whole routine. Oh, so you guys are lost, like you're hungry, let me help you. Um, let's see. So what she says about his crew, they ate well, they drank more, their bodies were lumpish here and there with fat, though their muscles beneath were hard as trees. Their scars were long, ridged, and slashing. They had had a good season, then met someone who did not like their thieving. They were plunderers, of that I had no doubt. And we do
And they're
kind of,
not.
I mean, they, yes and no. Odysseus's men did like everywhere they landed, something happened, but sometimes it really wasn't their fault. Like sometimes they just went somewhere and the people happened to be cannibals and killed their people that they sent to go talk to them immediately. But also, like, I mean, you can kind of argue they plundered Polyphemus. That like they
Yeah,
tried to rob him of his food.
but I feel like at least for me, like the idea of that is like they're showing up just to do that, and they
Yeah.
weren't really like they're not really ever doing that.
Yeah.
Um,
At this
Polyphemus
point,
is the
they're
closest
scared.
that happens, but most of the time, but even that situation, that's more Odysseus just leading them into a stupid situation. And
Yeah.
it's they're not like showing up there purposely to like steal stuff from Polyphemus and leave him the way that he's left. They just like are desperate for food and need help. And so
Yeah.
they like that's her saying like, oh, they came here to like steal from me so I can do whatever I want to them. And it's like we actually know these people, and they're not here to steal from you. They're not here to hurt you. But she turns them
Yeah.
into pigs anyway, and it just makes you think about all the other men that she did that to. Of like, um, are you okay? Like, are they okay? Did they actually would they have actually done that, or they were, or were they just trying to make like polite conversation with a
Yeah.
nice woman that they thought was like giving them food when they were starving before they left, and suddenly they were turned into a pig?
That is
Like
true.
you're never gonna know, and that's like why Rick Riordan shows his version of Circe the way that he does, of showing her like trying to get the same kind of thing. Like in that version, it's her offering Percy like this potion that's supposed to turn him into like the best version of him, like the most attractive and successful and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And she's like, "Don't you want to be like that kind of man basically?" And he's like, "No, I don't want to actually take this potion. I don't want to turn into that weird version of me. I just want to like find my friend and then leave." I don't want to turn into that, but he like felt like he needed to tell her yes because of like her like powers or whatever, but that's like the best, that's why he wrote her that way, because
Yeah.
she's like forcing these situations that like there was no way that any of these men that landed on her island that she wasn't going to think that they were trying to do that to her somehow. She's just
Yeah.
convincing herself of it. Like even with Odysseus, she's like surprised by the fact that he isn't. And if he was like a little more like low key about his Odysseusness, like he's like that, I think, with her because he's warned before he goes in there,
Yeah.
who she is and what she wants to do. If he wasn't warned, he probably would have been turned into a pig too.
Yeah. Well, so what's I'm trying to remember the order that it goes into because of course the Odyssey isn't in chronological order even as it's written, but I'm pretty
Mm-hmm.
sure they end up on Circe's island after the thing with Aeolus's winds, which I mean that was an instance of the men being greedy of like, oh well, Odysseus has this bag from a god, must have treasure in it. Um, so
Oh,
they have
that's
their
like
moments where they're human and but
that's
yeah,
always the thing I always think of. Like that just shows that Odysseus didn't build trust with those people,
exactly.
because if he
Yes.
did, they would have just trusted him. They wouldn't have felt like he was keeping secrets. But he is
Yeah.
keeping secrets because he's Odysseus.
Well, I heard someone make the argument, and I kind of get it. Someone was like, "Why wouldn't he just tell them?" And somebody, it was like a Reddit comment. They was like, "Hey guys, this is a bag of air." Like,
Yeah.
do you think that they would have believed him? I don't
Mhm.
know. You know, maybe
Mhm.
there was no winning in that instance, but
Yeah.
regardless, anyway, the men are because of if this is after Aeolus, like I'm remembering, but definitely because they've already been through some shit that we know about, they are probably more tired and just want to not worry about something happening to them for like 5 minutes.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, that's what we do know about them. So, let's see. She turns those men, the first group of men, into pigs. They don't talk about is it Eurylochus who Eurylochus is the like I remember in Epic he's like the one that is the crewman that has a lot of songs and stuff. But he is the one who goes to like he leads the group that goes to Circe and he's the one who decides I'm not going in. Something weird is happening here.
Mhm.
And he goes back to Odysseus, literally crying, like, holy shit, the things I just saw. Um, so that's what prompts Odysseus to come in. So once Odysseus comes back up the path, and one of the nymphs is like, hey, another one's coming, Circe thinks to herself, like, oh, they must not have sent everybody. I'll get everything ready again. She immediately notices that he's handsome. Like, I mean, girly is just like that. So she's like, oh, he's got a neat red beard with faint silver in his hair. He had a bronze sword at his waist. He was not so tall as some, but strong. I saw his joints were well seasoned. She's being very complimentary of him. Um,
What are well-seasoned joints?
I mean,
I
I
don't
just
know what
imagine
that
him
means.
doing muscular. Like, I mean, the more you use them, the better they work. But supposedly, but
I
yeah,
guess.
but yeah. So he goes in. She welcomes him, and let's see. He like she's starting to notice he's not noticing the same things as everybody else. So they still haven't completely cleaned up after all of the men got turned into pigs and there was like an overturned stool on the ground.
Mhm.
Odysseus notices that first and she's like, "Oh, I have some cats. They knock stuff over. You know how cats are." And then he sits down, she brings him food and wine. She notices that he winces when he bent, so maybe his joints aren't that well seasoned. Um, yeah, she notices there's a very famous scar that's brought up with Odysseus because his nurse is the one that notices it when he's disguised as a beggar and comes
Mhm.
back to
Mhm.
Ithaca at first. So she notices the jagged scar that ran up his calf from heel to thigh. It was old but faded. And so then he notices her loom. And she's like, Nobody's ever noticed that before. Like, none of these men looking around have ever noticed the one cool thing that I have, like
Mm-hmm.
my coolest thing. And he's like, "Oh, your loom's so sick. Was it Eastern?" She's like, "Yeah, it's Egyptian." And he's like, "Oh my gosh, it's so clever. They got rid of some of the problems with our looms. My wife's always complaining about the weights that we have to put on it, and
Mm-hmm.
this just seems so much more efficient." And she then is like, "Oh my gosh, this guy mentioned a wife. No one ever mentions a wife."
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so he starts talking about her. He says, the truth is, her favorite thing about weaving is that while she works, everyone around thinks she can't hear what they're saying. She gathers all the best news that way. She can tell you who's getting married, who's pregnant, and who's about to start a feud. She says, "Your wife sounds like a clever woman." She is. I cannot account for the fact that she married me, but since it is to my benefit, I try not to bring it to her attention. Um, I love that we get that cute little Penelope insert, even though
Mm-hmm.
like her and Odysseus do have a legitimate love affair type thing, but or I don't know if it's gonna turn more into a situationship like it was with Hermes, or if she's gonna have her actually fall in love with him. That's yet to be seen. Um, let's see. She says there's something familiar about him, and I think that that's our cue. Like this is the guy Hermes told her about that's gonna come. Um, let's see. She Hold, where's the part where it is? Where is your wife now? On your ship? At home, thank the gods. I would not make her sail with such a ragged bunch. She runs the house better than any regent. And then she's like, "Whoa, you're calling your crew ragged? They seem no different than other men to me." And he says, "You're kind to say so, but half of the time I'm afraid they behave like beasts." And it almost makes you think like he's dropping so many hints here. How does Girly
Yep.
not get it?
Yep.
um, let's see. So she does find out that the men are coming fresh from war. That's why they seem to have a lot of spoils still. And she's like, "I don't really understand why you men go to war. Like, what's the point?" And he's like, "Well, it's a matter of glory. But I wish you could have spoken to our general. You might have saved us a lot of trouble." What was the fight over? Let me see if I can remember this list. He ticked his fingers. Vengeance, lust, hubris, greed, power. What have I forgotten? Ah, yes, vanity and pride. I love that he just like calls out the Trojan War for exactly what it is.
Mm-hmm.
She says, "Sounds like a usual day among the gods." And he says, "It is your divine privilege to say so, my lady. I would only give thanks that many of those gods fought on our side." And so she's like, "Wait, he's acknowledging that I'm a goddess. That doesn't happen anymore either." So yeah, he tells her a little bit more about the war, that they were there for 10 years and now they're desperate to get back home. She says, "10 years, Troy must be a fortress." Oh, she was stout enough, but it was our weakness that drew the war out, not her strength, which honestly, like true.
Yep.
Um, let's see. Um, So he's talking about Penelope at home. He's like, she's probably running the ship so well, she's probably like doubled everything since we've left. And she starts asking him about the land, and he says he lives near Argos, cows, barley. And she says, "Oh, my father keeps cows. He favors a pure white hide. Um, they are hard to breed, true. He must husband them well." Which I know that like husbandry is a thing with animals, but I feel like she was
Mm-hmm.
putting another dig in there of like Helios and his cattle.
Mm-hmm.
She says, "Oh, he does. He cares for nothing else." Which, like, honestly, it does seem like maybe that is the thing he has the most affection for.
Yep.
Yeah, but she notices as they're having this conversation that Odysseus isn't drinking the wine she gave him. He's just kind of like holding the glass, sloshing it around. I feel like if you don't drink and you've ever been pressured to like have a drink, it's the kind of thing you do where you're like, I'll just, this is my prop now, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, let's see. And so he asks where his men are. She's like, they're in the back garden. They're getting some rest. And he's like, ah, that I don't know how you got them to be so quiet. You must have such a good effect on them. Like all of the hints this man's dropping. It's like, girlie, he knows your game. Give it up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so then she calls him out on the fact that he hasn't drank anything. She's like, you've not drunk. That's clever. I'm still a witch and you're in my house. And he said, we may settle this with reason. And he put the goblet down. He did not draw his sword, but his hand rested on the hilt. Weapons do not frighten me, nor the sight of my own blood. You're braver than most gods, then. I once saw Aphrodite leave her son to die on the field over a scratch. That's from the Iliad.
Mm-hmm.
It's when Diomedes goes on his little Athena like rage
Mm-hmm.
out. And let's see, witches are not so delicate. And then she notices he also has a bag on his waist. So she asks him what's in it. And he says, "Oh, it's an herb that I found." And she had heard the humming a little bit, like stifled humming. So she's like, "Black roots, white flowers." He's like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Mortals can't pick moly. What?" He said, "No, they cannot." Who was it? No, never mind. I know. And so she realizes Hermes has helped him out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and this is the part where Madeline divulges from source material, which is like she had even said Odysseus is not a pious man. When we think of piety, we think of like Christian piety. Like that's the reason why we don't use the word in the same like because I'm thinking of the Latin, not necessarily the Greek, pietas, and
Mm-hmm.
that is knowing your place. And Odysseus does. Odysseus shows reference to the gods. He does know that he is beneath them. Their will needs to be done. It's part of why he has so many gods helping him at times. And so, like, technically, he is a pious man, and a pious man would not doubt a god's help in this way. They wouldn't think about it. But what she has Odysseus say is that, like, yes, Hermes gave me this herb that's supposed to help me not fall under your effects, but I don't trust him because he's a trickster god, and it would be just like him to help you turn me into a or into a pig faster. And I kind of like that she did that because it does add a little more intrigue here. That the fact that he didn't even have to take the moly in this retelling.
Mm-hmm.
Um, are you always so suspicious? What can I say? He held out his palms. The world is an ugly place. We must live in it. Which like at that point, do you ever make friends with somebody who's in the same miserable place as you, in a way?
Yeah.
Yeah, like, but like, in the bad way, in the bad sense where like your camaraderie all rests on the fact that you hate the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like at some point that loses its steam, right?
Mm-hmm.
At some point it's like, shit, this person's keeping me in this mindset and I don't like this.
Yep.
So that's kind of the red flag that that line gave me is like, oh, he doesn't trust anybody because he's been on all these adventures that we know about from the Odyssey and has had bad things happen at every turn.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't trust people anymore either that are coming to her island. This is a match made in hell.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love also, so while they're talking now that they've given each other up, and she tells him, like, I'm Circe, I'm the daughter of the sun, um, he's like, yeah, you almost had me give away my game here by saying your father is a cowherd. And it's like, technically it's true though.
Mm-hmm.
Um, let's see. They have this like little flirting like face off here though, where she's like, okay, well you have Molly, so I can't do anything to you. And you can't really fight me because that's not gonna work on me. So we're at an impasse here. Um, let's see. Uh, she also tells him like you should understand your men would have robbed me blind. He says, I'm sorry for that. They are fools young and I have been too lenient with them. It was not the first time he made that apology. And she then starts thinking he reminds her of Daedalus. Um, let's see. Beneath his ease, I could feel a royal that Daedalus never had. I wanted to see it revealed. And so perhaps we could find a different way. What do you propose? Let's see. She tells him about the prophecy, which, like, I also don't know why Madeline put this prophecy in there of Hermes saying Odysseus is going to come to your island and that's it. It
Mm-hmm.
really is the most boring prophecy ever. So, it's weird to even bring it up again almost. Um, let's see. But when she brings up the prophecy and he's like, "Why would they give you a prophecy of just I'm gonna come to your island?" She laughs, and I thought it was like interesting what they said here. I felt poised as a hawk on a crag. My talons still held the rock, but my mind was in the air. So Hawk, of course, we know her name comes from Hawk. But on a crag, the other person we know is on a crag is Prometheus, and she's talking about her talons. Well, Prometheus is getting ripped apart by talons. So I
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why, if like this is supposed to be like, oh, I'm going against the type of thing that Prometheus would want me to do, or if it's just coincidental.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they say that they're gonna do a truce. Um, and she says, I've heard that many find their trust in love. And so basically she's like, we could go to my bed. And he says only a fool would say no to such an honor, but in truth, I think also only a fool would say yes. I am immortal. The moment I set down my moly to join you in bed, you may cast your spell. Unless, of course, you were to swear an oath that you will not hurt me upon the river of the dead. Which River Styx, highest kind of oath that you can swear. If you're a god, you you basically can't do anything for like a decade if you break an oath to Styx.
Mm-hmm.
You're like tortured and in a sleep state, and yeah, I forgot the exact details, but it's really bad.
Mm-hmm.
And so she decides to swear the oath, and that's where this chapter ends with that. Um, and I do love that we didn't have to see Hermes again for that scene to happen.
The thing about that scene that I felt really weird, like when I was reading it,
Hmm.
was I put a trigger warning of coercive rape for that because she's saying like he's basically agreeing to do that so that she will let his men go. And I was like, that's not consent.
It's not.
Does Madeline Miller know that? Like,
Um,
I legitimately don't know if Madeline Miller knows that men can be raped.
I don't think she thinks coercive sex is a thing. Like, but
I
yeah,
generally don't know. It's really weird reading her books. So I'm like, I don't know if you know this, but because people talk about Odysseus and her as like one of the nicer parts. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, he's the first time she's having him, at least the first time they sleep together, being as the only thing he can do to free his men.
yeah.
That's not because he actually wants to. He like explicitly says that he doesn't want to.
Hmm.
And so it's like, what? And by the time
Yeah.
I got to this chapter, I just like didn't care because I just wanted it to be over. So I was just like, of course it ends with her raping Odysseus. Like, what
Yeah,
the
well,
fuck?
the consent lines are so much weirder in the actual like source material because once he does his whole routine of like, oh, I have Molly, your spell didn't work on me, he pulls out the sword and that's when she kind of fawns over him.
Yeah.
And so it's, I don't know, like it feels equal-ish footing more so than like other instances that Odysseus goes through, but like it still isn't good circumstances.
And
And
when I
yeah.
read that, that didn't feel equal at all because he is in there to try to free his men.
Hmm.
Everything he says to her is to try to get her to like him
Yeah.
so that she will let his men go. Like, he doesn't actually, like, I'm not sure if he actually thinks the things that he was saying in that way. Like, he's talking about the things that he's talking about to get her to like him
Hmm.
so that she will not, like, keep his men there for all eternity, basically.
Yeah.
And so, like, that's what he's trying to convince her of this the entire time that he's there. that's why he's like, oh, talking about like her loom and things like that, because he knows that that's something that she would like. It's
Hmm.
not like because he actually wants to say that stuff or whatever. Even the stuff of bringing up his wife was like something to make her like him. And
Yeah,
so it's like that's why he's saying all that stuff. He's like literally somebody walking into like he's like a hostage person. Like he's walking in. It's like
that is true. Yeah.
he's like a police officer walking in to talk to somebody who's holding everybody hostage to try to get them to let the person who's holding them all hostage let them go. Like it's not like she has all of the power in that
Hmm.
situation. That's why she likes it. And that's what I mean by like she goes so far the other direction and I don't even think she like realizes it, and like we'll see like what happens in the next chapters to see if Madeline Miller even realizes it
Yeah.
because she might not.
She probably doesn't. Though I think the banter was her trying to be like, look, they can match each other here. They can match energy. And yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah, so we'll see where she goes with Odysseus because there is lore that is, that Circe eventually has children with Odysseus, that
Mm-hmm.
one of the children, I think, like accidentally kills Odysseus at some point, and then they all go, the whole family, Telemachus, Penelope, this son she had with Odysseus, all go to retrieve the body and give it a proper burial. And then one of her sons, I think the one that killed Odysseus, ends up marrying Penelope, and Telemachus ends up marrying her. I don't know that version of the myth very well, obviously, and this is just my understanding from like reading a synopsis of it.
Mm-hmm.
But like she could go the whole romance like aspect of Odysseus, like, oh, this is a man I actually love, but I can't keep him kind of thing. Um, or she might not. It's hard to say, but what we know from the Odyssey is that Circe helps him get through the underworld. He stays there for a year. She takes him to the underworld where he gets a prophecy of like how to best move forward, essentially,
Mm-hmm.
and things to look out for on the rest of his journey. So she is going to be involved more with the story. There is going to be more Odysseus. We just don't know what angle yet.
Mm-hmm. I will say one thing I did want to say at the end of this whole thing is I'm remembering how like people critique this book because they're like, oh, she was such like this cool, just like scary, badass, whatever woman. And now when she's in this book, she's like, you know, somebody like who's struggling with things and
Hmm.
believes in like patriarchy and things like that. I saw somebody, just a random person on Threads today, say something like will like feminists like realize that women in like Greek times had like they that they weren't completely ignored kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And I just like feel the need to say that like let people use Greek mythology stories to talk about issues that we have in our society.
Yes.
Like if like people using those stories now to discuss these things does not change like the actual like people who lived during that time. Like people using like the character of Circe to have her be raped or to talk about women being raped and abused by men and patriarchy and women not getting along because they're trying to like please the men that are in power. That
Hmm.
doesn't take away from the original story. Like the myth itself, original myth itself doesn't somehow change because somebody used the depiction of it. But also like let people use those stories because they're stories that are meaningful to people to talk
Yeah.
about things that we need to talk about because they're important. Like I
Yes.
don't know why this is so hard for people to do. Like my shirt is like Medusa. Medusa using her as like a way to make you feel safe. Like women, actually all people really, getting Medusa tattoos
Hmm.
and things like that to get like some power back after being raped doesn't like that doesn't somehow negate like the original myth. It
Yeah.
doesn't like change anything. And so Madeline Miller writing Circe in this way doesn't change if you want to only know her as like this like powerful woman that had like no backstory, that's fine. But when somebody is going to write an entire novel about her, it's because they want to do a novel going into like the patriarchy and how it harms women and and why the things that happen continue to happen the way that they do. And so I just get frustrated by seeing people do that, of like, that's not the original story. Nobody is doing these because they want to tell the original story.
Yeah, that's already
They're
been told.
they're doing these because those characters mean something to people and they want to expand on them, to like bring them into like our modern day and show that they are still relevant and are still important now. That's
Yeah.
the whole point of it all. And I just get like it feels like we're talking about two different things when that kind of stuff happens, when people are like, that's not the original Medusa myth, and it's like, that literally does not matter.
Yeah, it's not
Like,
the point of this discussion here.
no, like you're completely like missing the point when you bring that kind of stuff up, because it's like, that's not why no one thinks that that's the original myth, because nobody cares.
Hmm.
Like, that's the whole thing, is like, nobody who's reading this book like is gonna like make or break with this book if it's not exactly accurate to the original Circe myth. It's different because we are focusing on different things and using them as a way to talk about the things that we need to talk about in our
Yeah.
society now. Their story is out there, so we can use it as like a blueprint to expand on these things that are happening in a way that is easier for people to kind of like see what you're trying to get people to understand. And
Hmm.
it's like, it doesn't change that though. And it's just so odd how people do that, of like the Medusa myth isn't real, it's actually this version. And it's like, people using that as something doesn't change the original story. If you don't want to like it, you don't have to. And
Yeah.
it's the same thing with Circe. If you don't want to go into like a psychological thing about how the patriarchy affects people and makes them act in ways that they otherwise wouldn't, then don't read this book.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know, did people really think that she was going to write like a 300 whatever page book and have her just be this like mysterious person that just like killed people for fun and would never like do more than that? Like, if you want her to just be that, then okay, but this is a Madeline Miller book. She's not
Yeah.
writing a book like this about the patriarchy and using Circe as a way to explain it without showing how she's harmed by it.
Hmm.
And it's just like, it feels just like you're missing the point. Like, people care about these characters and these stories because they mean something to people, and this is a way to bring new meaning to these people.
Yeah.
And it just makes people like the stories more because you feel like connected to them.
Yeah.
Like, when I think of Scylla now, I think of like Scylla from this story instead of just being like a scary monster. It's like that kind of a thing, and that's like a good thing. It makes it all feel more, it's easier for people to understand. And I just wish that classicist people would understand that like, nobody who's liking the modern adaptations thinks that that's like the original, that's in canon, I guess, with the characters, because they don't
Yeah.
care about that.
Yeah. I mean, like, and even if they do, there's not a ton of harm in that. I,
No.
th- but that's again, that's why I have my whole attitude of nothing is canon when it comes to Greek mythology, because it's all
Mm-hmm.
fucking rewrites. It's all rewrites of the same stories.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, the Odysseus post that I had that got kind of big and still accumulates comments. I can't tell you how many people in those comments it becomes a contest of, well, I know more niche mythology than you. And like, I've seen it literally go down. There I stopped responding to any comments on it just because, like, I feel like one of the last ones I did, I was like, this is pedantic and stupid. Like, why are
Yeah.
you having this argument
I
on my
had
page?
what did I post? Oh, the thing that I posted today about being sad about the Circe version of the Minotaur being
Hmm.
stuck alone by himself when he's otherwise fine. And somebody responded and was like, he ate people. And I was like, can you please Google disability allegory in literary fiction?
Hmm.
And and then they left like one of those giant comments that
Hmm.
just goes on forever, like literally just like summing up what happens with the Minotaur in Circe. And I deleted it. And they came back later and was like, why did you delete my comment? I'm like, because you're not listening to what I said. If I
Hmm.
wanted like a plot synopsis, I would look this book up on Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Like, you immediately, he just went like, yeah, that's true, but, and it's like, no, go back to what I said. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we're not, and I told him, like, we're not having a conversation. Like, you're just needing to prove that I'm wrong. That's not a
Mm-hmm.
conversation. And so I'm not going to do that with somebody that's not even willing to, like, actually talk. And that's what a lot of times happens in those comments where I just delete them.
Yeah.
Even if they say, like, why did you delete them? That's why I delete them. Because I told you something, and instead of actually thinking about it, you immediately just, like, go back to finding a way to prove that I'm wrong about something. It's not a right or wrong situation.
Yeah. Oh, I have to bring up something to you because I've been thinking about this since I looked it up. So, remember when we were having the argument with people over the suitors and Penelope and
Mm-hmm.
what may or may not have happened?
Mm-hmm.
One person found something extremely niche and used it as an argument. It was Penelope consensually having sex with the suitors.
No.
Consensually. Like, she fully did it. And, like, that is not the same either.
No.
What? Yeah, I had to bring that up too because I was thinking about that and I'm like, wait a second, did someone really try to use that as like a, well, this is why Jorge's versions is okay, it's okay.
But
It's
yeah,
like,
it's like that one classicist person that we despise
ugh.
saying that, like, oh, Medusa's myth isn't real because it was consensual sex because they had sex in the field, blah, 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 whatever. Every time somebody who says that about Medusa, I'm just like,
You can get raped
um,
on a bed of flowers and it's still raped.
yeah,
Like,
you can not realize that you can get raped and then not realize that you were raped until, like, many years later when you actually tell somebody like
mhm,
me what happened and I point out, like, that's not actual real consent, and then you're like, oh shit.
mhm,
That happens a lot to people when they go to therapy and stuff, um, in general. And so yeah, like, that doesn't actually matter. And it's also just like the idea that, like, the arrogance, I guess is the right word for it, to
mhm,
think that you can just say definitively, like, yeah, this character was never raped and you can never tell me otherwise. Like, you sound just like the people that do these sort of things. And
mhm.
how, like, the every, like, you remember when, what's his name, um Neil Gaiman, when Neil
Mhm.
Gaiman's whole thing came out a couple months ago,
Yeah.
and his response was there was no rape, everything in that situation was consensual. I was like, you did it. You did it. As soon as they start telling you that there's no way that the other person felt that way, I'm like, you did it. Thank you
Yep.
for, like, making it very obvious that you what you did. There does Nobody has to, like, go back and forth about whether he actually did it or not because you made it that clear. When somebody else starts telling you how other people feel about things like that, the only person that knows how they feel about that is the person that went through it. You can't tell
Mhm.
somebody else if it was consensual or not, or if they really wanted it or not. If they say they didn't, then they didn't. And that's the end of that story. And so,
Yeah.
like, it's weird watching classicist people just, like, running around the world being that patriarchal and
Mhm.
not seeming to understand that they are.
Nope. It's built into the major, unfortunately. I feel
It's
like
very odd.
sometimes. It is. It really is. Like most classicists are men. I would say if I had to like do a full survey of my teachers
Mm-hmm.
in college, especially, that it was probably like I'd call it a 70-30 split of like how many professors were men and how many were women.
Mm-hmm.
And of course all of them were white. Um, Yeah, it's and that kind of stuff, it feels like it's baked in. It feels like the only people who cling to classics sometimes are old white people. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I think it goes back to the whole like white people don't have their own culture, and so they
Yeah.
borrow some, and so they either go to witchcraft or like ancient history, apparently.
That's why I think it's funny that a lot of them don't like Rick Riordan
Hmm.
because he got his degree and then got his teaching certificate because he wanted to just make the stories accessible to kids, but
Hmm.
he doesn't look at them the way that they do, and so they see him as, like, less than,
Yeah.
um, even though he's probably brought the majority of them into the field overall.
Yeah.
By just, like, his books being so successful have definitely helped so many adaptations being out there, and every adaptation brings more people in to learning about Greek and Roman mythology and making it feel like still relevant to the here and now.
Mhm.
Um, but I just think it's interesting. They don't like those classicist people we run into. They don't like that he made Medusa such an empathetic character because
Yeah.
they're like, oh, that's he just chose that myth because it's like the more fun, sexy one. And he's like, no, he chose that myth because he wants to teach kids not to like be like a bitch to the patriarchy. And so instead, he chose the myth that she's like that to point out because the gods in his books are all abusers.
Mhm.
And so, of course, he's going to use the myth of Medusa to show Percy that his dad does horrible things to people,
Yeah.
and that his mom also never would have been able to really like fully consent because she had no idea what he was actually going to do to her life when that happened. And
Yeah.
so like that's why he chose it, not because it's like the easy fun story, but because it's in line with what he wants kids to learn. He wants them to see like the sexism and patriarchal like damage that happens to people because of things happening that way.
Yeah.
And it's just silly how they talk about him in such a weird way.
Yeah.
And the other all the other like modern adaptations I've seen, like the other yesterday I saw this that I've seen like 3 times in the last like year and a half, and every time I see it on YouTube, it has more views.
Mhm.
And it got to like 1 million views now, and it's a YouTube video of a video essay of a classicist person basically saying that the modern adaptations that are feminist retellings are all wrong because they change the characters too much, and that if you're not somebody who's Greek, you shouldn't like use the myths ever. And it's a British woman.
Oh my God. Okay. Yeah.
And I like saw some of the video and I was just like, this is so ridiculous that she literally is like trying to like close rank enough to be like, well, if you're not Greek, you shouldn't be even telling the Greek people are the ones that are the most open-minded. The people that are Greek that have been in my comment sections are the ones that are like, I don't know why people are giving you such a hard time about Medusa. Just think whatever you want about it because their interpretation of those myths are very different from literally everyone else because it's their own culture.
Yeah.
And so it's just wild that like people are, I don't know, they just for some reason like talking about that stuff that way and I don't know why.
Yeah. And I mean, like, it. I'm trying to find a good way to say this. I feel like I've made this argument before with the Persephone stuff. A feminist retelling doesn't mean all of the women characters are beautiful, blameless, like
Mhm.
the victors, the ones that nothing bad ever happens to. Sometimes women are villains in real life and in fiction, and
Mhm.
sometimes it just needs to happen that way.
Yeah.
Um,
My
I feel
phone's
like
going to die soon.
okay, yeah, but like we can leave it there. Circe is on her little like villain arc. It's coming to a close because of Odysseus at least, so maybe that's a good thing about him coming around.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we will find out more about what happens with Odysseus. Don't think we have anything huge for Wednesday just yet, but I'm sure something will come up like immediately after we stop. I probably lost her. All right, well, we are ending it here. Anyways, we will see you guys on Wednesday for our just discussion one. Bye.